We are being hypnotized by people like this. Newsreaders, politicians, teachers, lecturers.
We are in a country and in a world that is being run by unbelievably sick people. The chasm between what we're told is going on and what is really going on is absolutely incredible.
Oh yeah, dude. There's some Nephilim shit.
It's like we all know what's going down, but no one's saying shit what happened to the home of the brave. Motherfuckers, they controlling us now, and no one's talking about how they made us modern day slaves. And everybody's just walking around, heading the clouds, and wanna wake up to a dead in the grave. But then it's too late, we need to be ready to raise up. Welcome to the end of days. Everybody is slaves, only some are aware that the government released.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Nephilim Death Squad. I am David Lee Corbo, a.k.a. The Raven. That is Top Lobster, the father of disinformation. Before we get into today's guest, I would like to remind all of our live viewers that this is a 30-minute preview only. Sometime around the 30-minute mark, we'll be going live exclusively to patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. But fear not, for a limited amount of time only, you can sign up for free and continue watching along, enjoying an ad-free viewing experience, and gaining early access to the episode before the general public does. Otherwise, guys, give it a couple of days, and this episode will release in its entirety. But I do suggest you go over to patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad so that you can enjoy this conversation. Joining us today is John Labon. John, for the audience who may not be familiar with you, where can they find your work, and what is it that you focus on?
Well, hello to both of you guys and to all your audience. John Labon coming to you from beautiful Plovdiv, Bulgaria. I've got a website called johnlabon.com. I've got a YouTube channel with a few thousand subscribers, and I've got, what else have I got? I've got a Medium, I've got a Twitter, all the usual stuff, all the boomer stuff. I see that you guys have a TikTok, which shows that you're more progressive than I am. I don't have a TikTok.
Oh, no, we're just you, John. We just started that up. In fact, I just put my wife, my newly unemployed wife, because we finally do well enough that she no longer has to work, and we've put her in charge of the TikTok as of this morning. So what you've seen there is a very poor attempt at keeping that TikTok page alive over these years or this year. But we're gonna really elevate it now. So yeah, just one of those things. You got to have your bases covered, right?
It's actually funny because when we were starting it, I was like, we need to have all the social media. So I made a TikTok. I was like, what the is this thing? And I hate it so much. So dude, I was just using it to. I was just posting clips like passively. I'm like, I don't even put a caption on some. I just put them up there. And I look back and I was like, hey, there's like a couple thousand people watching this stuff. I was like, maybe we should pay attention to it more. But I hate the way it looks. I hate the way it feels. It makes me feel like I love Twitter. Twitter is the dumpster of the internet, but TikTok is really the slums. I don't like it. It makes me, it's very mind controlling. So I stay away from it, but yeah, we got to use it more for boomers.
Well, I saw this clip on your TikTok when I was doing my research for this chat. And there's a clip of Owen Benjamin on your show doing his bit about how when people say, oh, if you don't want us to abort the kids, because it seems to be different ethnicities abort their kids at different rates. Yeah. And without getting into the nitty-gritty of that.
Statistics there.
Yes, it is, isn't it? And so he's got a bit where he says, if people say to me, if we don't abort them, what should we do? His bit is, oh, I'll buy them. And I thought that was rather amusing, that little clip that you uploaded. And it seems to be working. Some of you are
very thoughtful of him, isn't it? I mean, it's a nice gesture. It's like, I value your life. You shouldn't be aborted. I'll pay for you to have a life.
I'll be honest.
Yeah, and he even says he doesn't just want the black kids. He'll buy anybody's kids, black, white, whatever. He'll buy them. He'll give them a home.
I'm pretty sure he'd pay more for the white ones.
Owen has called me specifically, and he's like, listen, I'm just trying to justify slavery at this point, and if we can get this going, because he's got to fund on. Look at David choking on his coffee. It's hilarious, right?
Coffee, I almost spit it all over the keyboard.
The juxtaposition that you put people in when you give them this like it's like bad choice, worst choice, but you got to pick one. And if you don't pick, it's like a low IQ answer. It's genius. It creates good comedy. It's why Owen Benjamin where he's at right now, just constantly making people, forcing them to making them uncomfortable, making them make a decision, and making people think, making them think outside of this box. So yeah, he's the homie. He's been on the show a couple of times, been on my other show a couple of times. Love Owen. Great dude.
Well, I know you guys are meant to be the interviewers and I'm meant to be the guest, but I spent way more time interviewing than as a guest. So I hope you don't mind if I ask you some questions, including
No, please.
how long
It's
have you guys been
not
doing this
allowed,
for?
John. Not allowed.
When did you first get into all this conspiracy stuff?
Oh God, here we go. Don't go ahead.
Well,
wait,
I don't know if
can
you
I
know
answer for
this.
David? David, let me answer for you. I'm gonna answer as David, and he can answer as me. So actually, this is as David Lee Corbo, aka the Raven.
AKA the Raven. Thank you.
Yeah. Hold on one second. Let's switch this side. There we go. Actually, I've been a conspiracy theorist since for 16 years, and it started when I was very young. My grandmother had a slew
16.
since 16, right? My grandmother had a slew of abductions, and she wrote a journal about astral projection and remote viewing and things like that. My aunt was a schizophrenic who would talk about this stuff all the time, and I had a slew of experiences. Yes, there we go, 16. They know I've had a slew of experience, including demonic encounters and stuff like that, which made me look at the current events through the biblical lens. And then one day I saw this guy Top Lobster online, and he said, "Do you want to do a show?" Now go ahead and explain my story, David, if you've been listening for the last year.
My aunt lacks discernment. My aunt lacks discernment, and she got a hitchhiker, and she put some scissors in the lawn. And now I'm Top Lobster. I'm pretty sure that's the entire. That's exactly how. No, I mean, look, it's a lot of this is. Let's just say this show we were put together through Tony Merkel's show, The Confessionals, and that's very much a supernatural through the biblical lens kind of a show. And we were both fans of it. Started interacting in his members chat. And then, one thing led to another. Top was gearing up to launch his own solo conspiracy show. I had just launched my own solo conspiracy show. And, much to his credit, we got into a conversation on Twitter, and he goes, "Oh, you do a show? I'll listen to it," which is wild. Nobody's ever going to, when you first start off doing a show, if you're lucky, you have like 15 people who are like your aunt, your uncle, your cousins, and some friends from high school or something like that will listen to your show. So Top gave it a chance right out of the gate, and then whatever the hell he heard in it, he was like, "You know what? I think we could do something here." And so we've only been doing this show, this rendition of it for a year. But I mean, as far as being a conspiracy theorist, it's I don't know, man. At what point do you turn a corner and you say, "I am a conspiracy theorist now"? Because I think a lot of people will have some problem one way or another at some point in their life with the official narrative. But at what point do you then become a conspiracy theorist? It's hard to say. What about you, John?
Yeah.
Well, I was minding my own business. This was back in 2013, and I had decided not to drink alcohol that year. So I was like in my mid-20s. So I wasn't drinking alcohol. I was spending way more time on the internet. And one day on some forum, I think it was like a football forum or something, someone had linked a video of some other guy going through some photos and some video footage of one of those major events. So, the school shootings and the bombings. And this person was basically saying that this is fake, that these, whether it was the bombing or the shooting that led to the next one, whatever, but like, it was basically this guy saying, these people are actors, it's not real. And for example, he was showing some footage of someone's trousers, their pants. So this person was in a bombing, a marathon bombing, right? And their pants didn't look like they'd been ripped or torn. They looked like they'd been cut with scissors. Because if you think about it, an explosion ripping your pants, you'd expect it to be a rip rather than a cut. But these pants appeared to be cut. And so he was calling it the trouser bomb. And so I can't remember if it was the bombing that led to the videos about the school shooting or vice versa, but it was those two events that got me into all of this. Because at first I thought, this guy must be taking the piss out of the whole thing. He must be making up the footage. Like, in other words, the review he's doing of the news footage must be fake. He must be using fake. But no, he was actually analyzing what was meant to be the real stuff. And this was 2013. And then that set me down the so-called rabbit hole. And here we are, 12 years later. And I now no longer believe in outer space, dinosaurs, ancient history, to name just a few things. But it all goes back to one day just minding my own business, browsing the internet, if you can believe that.
Yeah, for me, it actually started. So as a child or as a young kid, I grew up in the church, so I was familiar with this. As a young crustacean, I grew up in the church. I was familiar with the supernatural and understood this to a certain extent. My family's always had some sort of weird supernatural experiences, so that's like intro to conspiracy. But I became like my social media platform grew when I was sort of in the Libertarian Party and involved with politics, and like actually deeply involved with politics and the Libertarian Party. I was doing a lot of work for them, artistic work, and producing podcasts, shit like that. And when you're looking at that at politics from this angle, that like obviously the default standard would be the government's lying to us, right? But most people just stop there and they go, oh, it's about money, it's about fraud. But the more that you like scratch at the surface there, you realize that there's a lot more underneath. And then you start scratching at that surface and you'll find things like this, weird happenings during bombings or false flag events and things like that, where people will stop and go, oh, this just happened, and maybe it's government, I don't know, maybe it's government malfeasance, like externalities, antipsychotics that are given to kids. And I'm like, well, maybe it's an MK Ultra program, and I started looking deeper. So that kind of, through politics, I have dived even deeper into conspiracy from that angle, and it's given me a good aspect, a good way to view it. And I think that's where I bring some sort of unique looks at the table that come from the political realm, which I'm trying to shed more and more, but it's still a useful tool to understand what's going on. I just don't buy into it anymore.
I don't know how old you guys are, but if you were into libertarianism, then maybe we're from a similar vintage or a similar crop. I was born 87, so I'm 37 years old. And I remember the Ron Paul revolution. Remember this? Back on Reddit and the internet forums. And this is when YouTube was still new. I think YouTube first began 2005 or 2006. So it was still relatively new. And back then, it was all about Ron Paul, audit the Fed. This is when, I can see in the background there, actually, for David, you've got Endgame. So that's Blueprint for Global Enslavement. That was around 2007 as well. So around that time, all of us who were in high school or early, university, or just in that young adulthood, this was a huge thing on the internet, the Ron Paul revolution. And back then, man, I was so idealistic. I really believed in people, humanity, the future, the internet. We can use the internet to get the word out there. We're going to be a force for change, all this stuff. And here I am now, all these years later, I'm like, well, didn't quite work out, did it, boys? Didn't quite work out the way we hoped.
In a way, like, well, right now, again, I don't really know what to make of these things, because I deeply distrust Donald Trump, deeply distrust Elon Musk. But on Twitter right now, Elon Musk is talking to Ron Paul, saying that he's going to put him in charge of auditing the Fed, which really means ending the Fed, if you just take a look at what they're doing. So I'm like, I am at a crossroad of, like, David loves to say, politics are theater at the highest level. And I would agree. I'm just questioning now, why are we auditing the IRS? Why are we
having a renaissance? Right?
Yeah, why are we're about to count the gold in Fort Knox, which is something, as you know, when I was in the libertarian circles, these are things that these guys were screaming about for years. Free Ross Ulbricht. Well, they did all these things. It's like, I don't know where to put this as a conspiracy theorist right now.
It becomes very strange because, this was very much a conversation we were having 2006, 2007, 2008. I was at Occupy Wall Street, and there was a lot of that sort of libertarian energy there. We went to go audit the Federal Reserve down the street from Zuccotti Park, and then we turned around when we got to the front doors, because it's all just a lot of people indulging in self-importance. So yeah, we're going to march to the Fed and we're going to shut it down. And then when we get there, everybody realizes that's... So we all just turn around and go back to Zuccotti Park. And that conversation gets put on hold. And here we are, almost 20 years later, and all of a sudden it's being resurrected. And I look at the Libertarian Party pretty skeptically because of the symbolism associated with it. Like, you have this torch, which gives me very much like Lucifer, the morning star, the torchbearer, like the Promethean kind of bringing mankind fire, right? And then you have this idea of, like, don't tread. Everything is about what's the word I'm looking for? Liberating yourself, right? And it's like the rebellion, because we look at things through like a biblical lens, and I think the fall of the angels is a theme that is continuing to plague us in one way or another, all the way in 2025.
Put a pin in that, David, because so John, you have an issue with ancient history, and I have a feeling that you're not going to agree with some of the theories that we would base our worldview on. I'd love to hear what you think about where David's coming from.
No, well,
I like it how you say that. I have an issue with ancient history. Yeah, you could put it that way. I do.
It's like I hate it.
I have a little bit of a bee in my bonnet about so-called ancient history, and I will tell you my theories, and I'll tell you how I arrived at all of this, and hopefully your audience finds it entertaining at the very least, whether they agree with me or not. But before we get to that, I did want to ask you, because I took some notes when I was preparing for our chat today, that opening track that you've got by, is it Vinny Paz?
Yes.
I'm going to confess I'm not too familiar with this dude, but I started reading his Wikipedia page and looking into the history of him. The lyrics of that track, the lyrics that you guys play in your opening, it includes a line about how we're being ruled by very sick people. Let's get to this.
Yeah.
We are a country and in a world that is being run by unbelievably sick people. Do you guys believe that? Do you believe that people who run all of this are sick or evil or demonic, this kind of thing?
I would say, well, you could make an argument for actually sick, because I think the royal families engage in a lot of inbreeding, and so there's consequences to that. But I think spiritually sick. I think they're in bed with ancient spiritual entities, and the only variance in that, being in bed with them is the degree to which they are aware. Like, some people are moved by spiritual forces. They are doing things they think are their own will, not realizing that something has been planting seeds and nudging them. And then there are other people who are engaging in ceremony and ritual and communing purposely with these. And I think it's all compartmentalized. The higher you go, the more they know, but there are degrees to it. The more you go down the ladder, the less they're aware, but they're still movers and shakers and players on the world stage. So yeah, I would agree with that. Sick, maybe because of the inbreeding, but certainly sick spiritually.
Well, the reason I ask is because I've been doing this. So like I said to you, I got into the Ron Paul thing, but to me, that wasn't conspiracy. That was more political. It wasn't until 2013 that I got hit with this crisis actor stuff. So that's where if you want to call it conspiracy, that's where that began. But I've been following this internet truth stuff more or less my entire adult life, right? And one of the things I've noticed is that a lot of the people who are here, a lot of them seem to have this idea of we're run by evil forces, demonic forces. A lot of them seem to believe that this place is basically hell. Because if it's evil people who are in charge, just think about this logically. If the world that we're in and the people who make big decisions that we have no real say over, if they're evil, doesn't that mean we're kind of living in hell in a sense? You know what I'm trying to say?
So
well,
the reason mythology... that I would say that's not the case is because we have these like really beautiful moments in between it, right? Like I can hang out with my son at the park and hold my wife's hand and be filled with like this overwhelming sense of like love and satisfaction. I don't think you're going to get that in a hellscape. I think what happened instead is that we have this thing that is beautiful, and over it has been laid a facade, a mask, or systems that have been created nefariously and then implemented on this thing that actually has quite a bit of beauty in it.
No, that's a good answer. So I'm going to hit you with something that I wasn't even planning to talk about, but if you're ready for this, let me tell you. Maybe 6 months ago, maybe 8 months ago, it was the summer of last year, I was sitting here and I was reading one of the different forums I like to read every now and then, and someone made a post about basically where we're really living. And I'll see if I can find it and send you guys a link if you want to screen share it or whatever. But basically, let me give you the gist of it. This guy, I think it was a guy who wrote this, basically wrote, I can tell you where we're really living and everything will make sense. And I was like, I'm open-minded. Let's just give it a try. And if I can summarize what they said, it went like this. This place where we're living in, many of us remember an instant or instances where we thought we were going to die or we thought we should have, but somehow we survived. Whether it is a car accident or some very dangerous situation where we thought maybe some bad stuff was about to go down. Or in his case, it was a drug overdose. Whoever wrote this post, he said he overdosed on drugs and he thought he should have. But before he knew it, he was back home and he was fine. Didn't die, no long-lasting consequences. But he was certain he was going to die. And what he noticed over the next period of months or years was that a lot of bad things were happening. Friends were getting sick, or their kids were getting sick, or all this bad stuff was happening. And eventually he realized that he had, and hell isn't some place full of flames and fire and brimstone and, some big red devil walking around. It's not like that at all. Hell is simply the life or the world that you wanted to, or that you thought you were living in, but now bad things are going to keep happening over and over again. Because if you just sent people to a hell where they knew that was in hell, they would start to, like, as humans, we can cope, we can adapt, we can rationalize things. Whereas if you think you're not living in hell, but you are, that's when the pain will be felt even more fully.
Today's episode is brought to you by PurgeStore.com. What if I told you that more people have ever from war? What if I told you that diseases like cancer, multiple sclerosis, acne rosacea, and rheumatoid arthritis can all be treated with parasite medication? Rid your body of these all too common by using Purge Parasite Cleanse. Purge Parasite Cleanse is made with ingredients like zinc, carrot powder, garlic, black walnut. These are all natural ingredients that keep you safe while you're on PurgeStore.com, try out their Digestimes to promote healthy gut bacteria and aid in digestion. These, as well as any other products on PurgeStore.com, can be purchased with a promo code NEPHILIM, NEPHILIM, will save you 15% off of your entire purchase at PurgeStore.com.
And so the point that this guy was making was, you might already be living in hell, but hell has to give you a bit of beauty. It has to give you sunsets. It has to give you romance. It has to give you some love, just enough to keep you emotionally invested in this place, not to end it all. But really, all of the bad things you're seeing, the bad things that happen to you, the bad things that happen to people you care about, this is all a result of you dying in your original real world, and now you've woken up in hell. That's my summary of what he wrote. And I read that, and I was just sitting here in this exact same seat, and I was like, I'm not going to agree with this guy, but that would make a lot of sense if that turned out to be true. Because I've had experiences where I was like, I should be dead. And then I wake up in my bed. Relatively safe and sound. And I'm like, firstly, I shouldn't have done whatever I did to end up in that situation. But secondly, how come I got away with it scot-free? And I've spoken with people about this. And a lot of people tell me similar stories where they don't actually know how they lived, but they're still here. And you start to wonder, is there a reason, fellas? Like, is there more to the story?
I've heard that in the context of like a very similar story, but then the conclusion that the person went to is that they essentially hop timelines. And I don't know how much I give credence to the sort of timeline thing. I recognize that through Hollywood, we've been inundated a lot lately with this theme of like the multiverse and alternative realities. I don't know where I fall on those topics, but I know that I've read enough testimony or been subjected to enough testimony of individuals who have experienced these things. And I don't dismiss people's experiences. I just am critical about the conclusions that they draw. So in other words, I believe, let's say like a David Icke, for example. David Icke in his own autobiography says that he had this moment where he was suddenly the recipient of a download, and it was this gigantic chunk of information. There were voices, and he came to the conclusion, because of what these things told him, that they are the spirits of ascended masters from Atlantis. So, like I said, I don't discount people's testimonies. There's no way to prove it right or wrong, so I like to entertain it and think, well, what did this person go through? And my only problem with David Icke in that situation is the conclusion that he came to, which is these entities are not lying to me, and so I will take their nature as they deliver it to me. They are ascended masters from Atlantis, and they're giving me this information for one reason or another. So when somebody says they had that experience, like I don't think that that's untrue, that somebody had something where they thought that they were dying, or they thought that they but then the next thing they know, they're awakened safely in their own bed. I have heard that several times. It's just, then do we need to go to the conclusion that you're in hell, or do we need to go to the conclusion, and I'm not saying that this is what you're doing, but you know, it's like, as human beings, we're going to try to wrestle with that and try to understand that. And I don't claim to, but I also don't know if I subscribe to that timeline thing, or the multiverse thing.
John, do you so you told us that you don't believe in outer space.
Yeah, you guys cool with that, by the way. I dropped 3 of things in there. I said the dinosaurs, the outer space, and the ancient history. Usually one or more of those is going to, it's kind of like throwing bait out into the sea. Usually someone's going to nibble on one of those three. So outer space, where are you guys with the outer space thing? Are you outer space believers, or have you sort of moved past the space?
No, listen, I don't think...
That's a very loaded question. I'm sorry, guys.
No, that's a great question.
No, it's a
Where
great
are you
question.
with the space?
Like, where are you at?
Where
Is space
are you
fake
on
and gay
outer
or what? So I don't know what space is. I know that we can't go there. I know when I look up, we're seeing something. We're seeing some sort of stars. We're seeing something out there, but I definitely know for sure that we cannot get there. Now the question is, this brings the question of aliens and our outer space aliens and come from different light years and planets and shit like this. I don't think that that's the case. I think that what we do see is real, but I think it's interdimensional. We're led to believe that they're coming from far, far away. I don't think so. I don't really know what we're looking at when we look up there. Maybe there are lights. Maybe there is stuff out there, but I know for sure we can't go there. We can't get off this rock.
I've gotten. Oh, I'm sorry, Top. Did I step on you? Are you going to say something?
No, I'm just going to say that I think there's a lot more nuance and veracity to the idea of interdimensionality rather than traveling outside. And we can kind of see this through the use of psychedelics, through meditation, through astral projection, even CERN seems to be more concerned about the interdimensionality of this world than whatever we're doing. We have Elon Musk throwing fake rockets at the firmament. This is not, it's not bearing any fruit, in my opinion. We have a fake moon landing. This has been beaten to death and proven fake over and over. So
we have pictures from Mars that claim to be real, and then you find out that they bear striking resemblance to a desert in Nevada.
Like Arizona, or something. Yeah. I'm saying that because I think when people have these near-death experiences, these views on the other side, there are layers of interdimensionality in this realm, and this, what we live in right now, is created in a way where this is a physical realm, but there are realms beneath us and above us that have different properties, different dimensionalities. We can go there. People have gone there. They travel to a DMT realm. They experience the same thing. If you take ayahuasca, people will have hallucinogenic trips that mirror each other in the same spot. So that's telling me that there's this idea of the upside down, like Stranger Things. This idea is not just a movie. It's like a science fiction fact almost. So I like to look at it that way. So when people have these experiences, I start to think they're experiencing something that's real, but where are they going to see this? And what is the actual reality of things? What is the most true reality? Well, I don't know. We live here. Some would say that the most true reality might be wherever the creator resides, big G God. Right. And then maybe there is a hell that's a different layer of this interdimensionality where people will go. That's kind of where my brain goes when I think of these things.
And I've also gotten to the point where we look at the ancients, where we've made a bad habit of looking at, early cultures and their mythos, and we look at them as being less developed or less intelligent. And more and more, I'm starting to think that's not the case, especially given their relationship to their understanding of the stars and celestial bodies. And a lot of them built their megalithic structures to mirror, it's like the Great Pyramids are mirroring Orion's belt. They are building these structures around the spring equinox or the winter solstice, and everything has this astronomy bent to it. And so there's so many of them, I shouldn't say all of them, but so many of these ancient civilizations depicted almost like a realm that seemed to be stacked on top of other realms in a way and encased with a firmament. And even the firmament thing is like, how can I shake my head at that? Werner von Braun, who's the Nazi that we borrowed, and he created NASA.
borrowed
we borrowed that Nazi. And when he put a biblical reference on his tombstone that, when you look it up, is about the firmament. God showeth his handiwork in the firmament. So when you watch Elon Musk launch his rockets, I can't lie. I mean, I'm not, an aerospace engineer or anything like that. But if I look up, it looks like these objects are crashing against the surface of water. And you know, I don't know what that means or what to make of it, but I know that it's been hinted at so often. It's like when you have in the Truman Show, right, where he basically escapes the firmament. He finds the edge of it and he, you know, leaves through an exit door. I just kind of feel like we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to our interpretation of what the ancients did or didn't know. And there's a lot of conjoining material between all these different civilizations that kind of say the same thing. And we ridicule it. I don't know if it should be ridiculed.
Well, you know who's doing some ridiculing in the live stream chat? Emily says that space is fake and G. I don't know if we can use the other word that she used.
Say whatever you want. John, also, please feel free to ignore Emily. She's the bane of our existence.
Yeah, she's a terrible person.
Well, on the same page as Emily, she says that space, dinosaurs, and evolution are all F and G. So I'm glad to see that, Emily. Good on you. By the way, I'm not even on the YouTube right now. Are you guys streaming on YouTube? Like, how many live viewers have we got for this first half hour?
Right now, we're at closing in on 400.
Wowee. Well, hello to all of the viewers. I'm still new to these guys here. I found your show, The Nephilim Death Squad, through Human Vibration, and that was a terrific interview. And I've got to give both of you credit. I should have said this at the beginning. You two know how to do an interview where you ask the guest questions and listen. Do you know how rare that is in this day and age, at least so far as I can tell? A lot of the people I follow, the interviewers seem to get guests on the show just to tell the guest the same story they told the guest last week and the week before.
I do a fair bit.
Whereas you guys just let HV just speak on her John Benet Ramsey stuff, and I thought it was terrific. But the thing is, getting me on the show here, because we're sort of starting from scratch here, I don't know where you guys are at with different topics. We're kind of still in that sort of feeling out stage of the process. We're sort of, what do these guys know? Where are we going to be on the same page? And the outer space stuff is an important one, because if somebody still believes they're a little speck of dust living on a giant spinning ball going around the sun, hurtling through space at breakneck speeds, the infinite vastness of space, I can relate to that because I used to believe that up until about 10 years ago. I just believed this stuff without question. And then about 10 years ago, to the month really, this guy called Mark Sargent comes along, and he's got this YouTube series called Flat Earth Clues Part 1. And the first one is called Empty Theater. Now, I'm sure you guys are familiar with Mark Sargent and the whole flat Earth thing circa 2015.
I am not familiar with Mark Sargent or that idea of empty theater. That's fascinating. Could you give us a little bit of that?
Well, okay, so this guy, Mark Sargent, he comes along and he uploads this video series. This is 2015. So I'm still pretty new. I only started YouTubing at the end of 2014. So a few months after I started YouTubing and podcasting, mostly on politics and the fake shootings and bombings. That was as advanced as I was at that time. A few months later, this Mark Sargent comes along and he uploads this video series called Flat Earth Clues. And the first one of the series it's called Empty Theater. And he talks about how few films there are that have been made from Hollywood to do with either the moon landing itself or on the moon. And I'd never really thought about it. But his point is basically, you think of all the films, like Hollywood produces so many films. Is it thousands of films a year? I don't know. They produce so many films on so many different things. But this amazing human achievement, putting man, like that's an amazing achievement. If it's real, that is phenomenal. Putting a man on the moon, a bunch of men actually, they're playing golf, they're driving dune buggies, and there just aren't that many movies about it. That is strange. And so his point was the reason for that is because if they made a Hollywood film showing the so-called moon landing, it might cause people to revisit the footage of the supposed real moon landing and see how amateurish it is. So anyway, Mark Sargent, this flat earth guy, makes this massive splash. His YouTube videos start going viral. People start interviewing him. And then within days of his first upload, this guy called Jeranism comes along. And Jeran's like this cool, I don't know where he's from, but he kind of talks like a cool sort of, you know, surfer dude, easy to relate to, I guess, for younger people. And so he starts doing these live streams and the whole flat earth thing got big. So what first put my channel on the map and first got my first, like I had maybe 500 subscribers for the first few months I was doing this. Then I started interviewing the flat earthers one by one on a weekly show. It was called the Ball Earth Skeptic Roundtable. And I interviewed Mark Sargent, Eric Dubay, Stars Are Souls, Wakey Wakey, all of the big names in flat earth at that time. I was interviewing them on a weekly basis. And even though I'm not a flat earther and I wasn't a flat earther, I was giving them a chance to present their arguments, to present their beliefs. And I was being very cordial with them, largely because I agree with them, space is fake. So we've got something very It seems like a very important thing to have in common. We don't believe in space. They believe in flat Earth. I don't. But let's do a weekly show. And we did that. And for a little YouTube channel, it was relatively successful. And then what followed that, and I didn't expect this, didn't see it coming, but it all makes sense in retrospect. A whole bunch of other channels popped up and started doing their weekly shows about flat Earth. And before you knew it, flat Earth took over the internet. So maybe you guys weren't following it closely, but do you remember how this happened back in 2015? Flat Earth just took over YouTube, took over Twitter, took over conspiracy forums. It all became flat Earth, 2015, 10 years ago. Do you guys remember this?
Yeah. I don't personally remember it too much, but I recognize that the rhetoric has become such that now people say, yeah, in 2016 and such, the PSYOP began. So people look to it, if you're a flat Earth denier, people say that's when the PSYOP began. I mean, I don't know where I fall on it. I empathize greatly because NASA lies a lot.
Well, I still to this day feel, maybe guilty is not the right word, but I played a role in all of that. So you look at these Eric Dubés, these Mark Sargents, these David Weiss. David Weiss was on the Alex Jones show a few months ago. David Weiss was one of my panelists on that show, the Baller Skeptic Roundtable. It was myself, David Weiss, and another dude, and the three of us would interview all of these flat earthers one by one. We were the first ones to do that. And then after 12 weeks of that series, I was like, okay, I think we've looked into this topic enough. We get the arguments. Time to move on. I had no idea that this was here to stay. So David Weiss stuck with this, and he's now got his Flat Earth app, and he's making good money from the looks of things. He's going on the Alex Jones show. He's friends with Eddie Bravo. He's really taken this and done a very good job, I suppose, to look at it one way. But that all goes back to this Baller Skeptic Roundtable on the John Labon YouTube channel back in 2015. As crazy as that sounds. So to all the people out there who are sick of the Flat Earth and are sick of all of this nonsense, who feel like the Flat Earth thing has ruined or besmirched the conspiracy theory subculture, to all of you lovely people, I say, I'm sorry. I had no idea. I didn't know it was going to go like, really, I meant well. I really meant well. I thought,
John, I mean, don't blame yourself. Like we had guys like L.A. Marzulli and we're releasing his episode today. Gary Wayne. These guys were standing on the shoulders of giants. Literally, they're talking about the Nephilim, and then we come along talking about the Nephilim, and I'm sure that they see this and they go, like these. Yeah. So it is. It's fine when you introduce something into the ether and there's something to it. It's going to blow up and it's going to eventually fall out of your hands. So it's not your fault.
That's the thing. It's like when I look at the flat Earth community, I mean, there is some of that. I won't lie. Like there is a little bit of contention or something of the like when I look over and I see, everybody kind of freaking out about it, and it becomes this topic that takes over, and then it's kind of the mark. You know what I mean? In the sense that it's a litmus test. Do you believe in flat Earth is now a litmus test? And I've looked into it, but I'm far too to be able to really grasp, especially when everybody starts going into like these calculations and like the mathematics don't check out, and the dimensions of the planet that are given to us by like NASA are for some reason riddled with like 666. That's something that I was exposed to probably early in this show, or maybe it was my other show, The Ravens Watch. But either way, there's so much that eludes me. I don't have the ability to grasp it, and something about it almost feels a little bit boring. However, when I look at what NASA does and all these composites, CG renderings, every time they show you Earth from outer space, the continents are like wildly varying in size.
Yeah.
It doesn't even make any sense. And if you start thinking about how much money we give them, I look at NASA much more of like a propaganda arm, or an arm of the propaganda machine rather. And so I'm pretty comfortable in my assessment of NASA. And so you could see how that is a very easy jump to be like, well, if NASA is lying in so many different ways and they are the ones that are feeding us this narrative, well, you feel compelled to throw away the entire narrative. And as far as my own eyes can determine, we're on a flat, stationary plane. Every time I see a video about how much curvature should be measured over X amount of miles, and therefore when you look through a telescope or whatever, you shouldn't be able to see this landmass across the ocean. You shouldn't be able to see the base of this ship. You shouldn't be able to see the base of this building. And yet, given a good enough camera, you can zoom in and you can see the base of these buildings that you shouldn't be able to see. So then they start just moving the goalposts. Well, the equations are wrong. Our mathematics in regards to like curvature per mile are off. We need to adjust it. I'm like, okay, that's great. So I guess I'll just wait until you come up with a new formula, and then we'll look to see if we can see the base of that building again. So I've not delved into it deeply, but John, I mean, considering you started the conversation in very many ways, where do you fall on it these days?
Well, you sound to me, Dave, and I mean this with the greatest of respect, you sound like one of those I'm not a flat earther, but kinds of people.
Yeah,
that's what exactly. It sounds like.
Me too.
And I know you have to end the stream soon for the public upload, and then the full upload goes to your patrons. Can I tell your patrons in the second part of this conversation, if these two lovely hosts will let me, I'll get into more detail about why I think history is a hoax. Ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, ancient China never existed. And I'm not one of those people who just says things like clickbait or just outrageous. So many conspiracy people just say outrageous stuff to get attention. That's not what I'm doing. I've got the documents. So I'll explain why history is a hoax. If they want, we can talk about my documentary where I went into the middle of Australia to find the so-called dinosaurs, and what I found shook me to the depths of my miserable soul. And I'll explain what I think this place really is. That'll all be in the second part of this presentation, which you can get at these guys' Patreon, which costs how much, boys, to join your Patreon? Like
Actually,
$8 or $9
right
a month. It's nothing.
It's totally free right now. That's what the fantastic. We're running a little bit of a promotional period right now where you can sign up for free for 7 days and try to absorb as much content as humanly possible before the billing cycle kicks in. Isn't that lovely? So why don't we do this then? We are at the 42-minute mark. Guys, if you're watching on Rumble, if you're watching on Twitter, if you're watching on Twitch, if you're watching on YouTube, I highly recommend you head on over to patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. Sign up for whatever tier you'd like, even the free one, and you can continue watching along, enjoying an ad-free viewing experience, gaining early access to the episode before the general public, but also being able to sound off in the chat like all these lovely people, right? Shout out to Red LeBeard. It says, yeah, bye, pores. So nice. We're now going to be cutting that stream. Are you ready, Top? Are we up? There we go.
I'm ready. Guys. Yeah, this is thank you for the promotion here, because I'm like,
hey boys, I'm was that slick or what? Was that smooth as silk?
Beautiful segue.
You got me this. I'm paying for my own Patreon right now. I'm like, I got to see what this guy's gonna say here.
I just started typing in billing information. So okay, before we go on though, John, I do want to get your thoughts a little bit on, like, this narrative has evolved greatly over the past decade. Right, because 2016, it's 2025 now. So this thing's been going for a while. A lot of people think it's a psyop. We just had that big thing where they went out to Antarctica and they tried to prove their model, and apparently that failed. But does that inherently mean that the Earth is then a spinning globe that rotates around a giant gas ball in the middle of outer space? Not necessarily. Just means that the model that they were working with doesn't exist the way they thought it does. So where do you fall on it these days?
Yeah, so that thing was called The Final Experiment.
Yeah.
And I interviewed the guy because I've got my website, johnthebond.com, but I've got an interview-based podcast as well, which is separate, where I get different guests on the show when we have a back and forth, me and the guest. So I interviewed Will Duffy, who was the host, the organizer of The Final Experiment. And basically what he did was he said, these flat earthers who are claiming you can't go to Antarctica, that's not true. If you spend about $30,000, there's companies who will take you to Antarctica. And not only this, the flat earth, it's not cheap, but still it can be done. Because a huge part of the flat earthing when they first started was they had what they called 100 proofs of flat earth or 200 proofs of flat earth. And one of them, or one of the multiple variations, was you can't go to Antarctica, as in it's off limits. If you try to go, some Navy will stop you, someone will stop you. So Will Duffy was coming along to basically say, that's not true. You can go. And then the flat earthers were saying, if you go there, there's no midnight sun in Antarctica. So if you go to any northern country, including, say, Estonia, where I've been in the summertime, the sun either doesn't set, or if you're just a little bit south of that region, the sun will set, but only for a couple of hours. Why? Because on the ball model in the summertime, the direction that the Earth is facing, The sun never really gets out of that field of view, for want of a better term. I'm not using the technical terminology, but you get the idea. Now, on the ball model, the exact same thing should happen in the south. If you go far enough south, the day should either be a 24-hour day, or the sun should only set for an hour or two, depending how far south you go. So the flat earthers were denying that. They were saying you can't go to Antarctica, and even if you could, there's no midnight sun, because on their map or their model, whatever you want to call it, it's kind of like a dish. So that can account for the midnight sun in the north. There's no way it can account for the midnight sun in the south. So they were saying it doesn't exist. So Will Duffy, this final experiment guy, said, let's find out. I'll pay for my ticket and I'll pay for a flat earther's ticket. Let's go. And so to cut a long story short, they went and they were able to get to Antarctica, and they documented a midnight sun in Antarctica, exactly as the ball model would predict. And then, of course, some of the leading flat earthers said that it was all fake. It was fake footage. It was done on a green screen, whatever. But what really mattered was the flat earthers' response in the lead up to the final experiment. So remember, at this point, they've been saying for 9 years, you can't go to Antarctica. There's no midnight sun. When someone came along and said, I'm going to Antarctica, I think there might be a midnight sun, all of a sudden the story's changed to, oh, well, there could be a midnight sun, but we've got this other explanation. So when you see someone changing their story so rapidly, you know this person's probably bullcrap. That's exactly what happened. So whether people believe the final experiment was real or it was filmed on a Hollywood studio, whatever they think, what matters is the flat earthers' response, and it revealed who these people really are. They are clowns, fools, and charlatans, in my personal opinion. And I know that's going to lose a lot of viewers. They're going to say, well, forget this JLB, whatever. That's up to them. But for me, I expected there would be a midnight sun because the ball model makes sense. There was a midnight sun. And the flat earthers changed their stories because their stories are bullcrap. So I don't know if that explains enough to you, but that's where I'm coming from with all of this. The final experiment should have put this whole thing to bed.
So
do you know Dustin Nemos?
These days, do you find yourself? Oh, that's a great question. Go on top.
Yeah. It seems like you're talking about Dustin Nemos specifically, because I thought that his criticism of it, where he's like, oh, well, look at the perspective of the shadows. I was like, yeah, well, it looks like, I mean, that's how light would react. If a light source is closer or further away, it would cast shadows in a certain angle. So yeah, I don't know what to think about. What I think is it seems like it's not what they're telling us. It's not round in the sense that they're telling us, and maybe it's not flat in maybe the map is not correct, or maybe the way that they're predicting the sun goes around is not correct. But somebody's lying. It's a certain shape, but we're certainly not round flying through space. So
where do you fall on it these days, John?
So have you guys flown? You both sound like you're American. Have you flown to other parts of the world in an airplane?
No, I am completely uncultured and have gone virtually nowhere.
I have.
That's a good response. Okay, so, and I'm not asking this to be a smart. I'm just asking because I thought you would say probably you have, but that's okay. If you were to fly to Asia or to Europe or whatever, you would be told your flight's going to take a certain period of time. And if you were then to map that on a ball model, you would find it makes sense. At the speed these airplanes supposedly fly, that flight time makes sense. And I've flown all over the world. I've been to Africa, Asia. I'm living in Europe now. I'm from Australia. I've been all over. And all of the flights I've taken have taken as long as they said. They all make sense on a ball model. And anyone can try this. Go to Flight Center website. Just find out how long are they claiming it takes to get from New York to London, or from Los Angeles to Sydney, or from anywhere to anywhere. Find out how long it takes and then see if that fits the ball model. And you will find that they do. All of the flights do. Now, if someone hasn't taken the flights, they can say, oh, but maybe they're fake flights. I've taken enough flights. I think these are legitimate. The flights all make sense on a ball model. Why? Because this realm that we live in, whatever it is, can be modeled with a ball. Doesn't mean we live on a ball, but a ball model can explain the flights. It can explain the sun, the moon, the stars. It explains all of it. Doesn't mean outer space is real. Doesn't mean we're on a ball going around the sun. Doesn't mean any of that. But in terms of what we can observe with our eyes and what we can experience, it all makes sense on a ball model. And for some people, that's too complicated because they don't understand the map is not the terrain. So suppose you come to Plovdiv. I live in Plovdiv, Bulgaria. This is the second largest city in Bulgaria. And they say there's 300,000 people here. I don't know if that's true, but it's a small city. If you were to come and visit me here, which many people have done, and you said to me, JLB, where is the nearest place where cute girls dance? I would say, well, I don't know. I'd never go to such a place. And then I'd say, actually, come here. And I'd draw you a little map. And I'd say, okay, you go down that road there. You turn left at the yellow bank. You keep walking down there. Then you turn right at the intersection, walk 50 meters. That's what you're looking for, right? Now, if you took my little piece of paper and you followed my directions and it worked, you would say that this map is accurate. Even though you don't live on a piece of paper, you live on Earth. Now you're in Plovdiv. A map is just a model. It's a framework. And if it is accurate, then it's good. So it is with the ball model. The ball model is accurate. Doesn't mean you live on a ball. Just like my little piece of paper to get to Showgirls, doesn't mean you live on a piece of paper, but does the map work? Yes, it does. There you go. So the map is not the terrain. I'm not saying we live on a ball. I'm saying the best model is a ball. And to me, this is a very straightforward concept. But even intelligent people, even when I go through this process with them, explain that to them, very similar to how I just explained it to you, they come back to me with, but does that mean you think we live on a ball? And I'm like, okay, did you just listen to what I said? I'm saying the best model. I'm telling you, I've been through this exact process with so many people. The normies, the regular people, these people who just get up, brush their teeth, go to work, do whatever the boss says, come home, drink some beers at home, go to bed. These normal people who lead normal lives, I don't expect anything from them. They're just normal people. But these intelligent people, these people who seem intelligent, they seem thoughtful, when they can't understand the basic concept like the map is not the terrain, when they can't understand this stuff, I realize it is basically a waste of time. And I now believe most people, including most so-called awake people, they're effectively non-player characters. They're effectively bots. It's not their fault. It's just the nature of this realm that we live in. Most people don't really think. They just parrot. That's all they can do. So then I come along and I say, okay, these people parroting that we live on a giant ball going around the sun, they're just parroting what they were taught in school or what Neil deGrasse Tyson said, who, by the way, I've seen him live. I can tell you a story if you want to hear about that. But they just parrot what they're told about us being on a ball going around the sun. They're just parrots. These are other people who come to me and they say, oh, JLB, don't you know water can't stick to a ball? How come the airplane pilots don't dip the nose? These people are just parroting flat earth talking points to me. There's no thinking going on, you see. And to understand the abstraction of the model, the framework, the map is not the terrain, this requires thinking, which most humans don't want to do. They think they do, but they don't, and they won't, and that's how it is. So perhaps, I'm not sure if that explains it.
No, it does. I mean, it's left me with more questions, but it does make a lot more sense because I've been thinking a lot now about, well, this final experiment, it doesn't disprove it being flat or the shape of, but what it does disprove is the map. And what you're saying right now makes a lot of sense. Like, yes, this round map does make a lot more sense as far as like travel times and the way things will react. But a thought in my head that I've always had is as we travel, let's say I'm traveling west because we're in Florida. So let's say I'm traveling to California. If I travel at a specific speed going west, time doesn't even really change because they're 3 hours behind us, right? So isn't that like a form of time travel? What are we doing metaphysically if we are moving across this plane, whatever it is, with time? Like technically, if I can move with the sun the entire time, does that change the shape of what I'm moving on? Were we ever supposed to be able to move in such a way across the earth? Or were we supposed to be in one spot? I don't even know, man. There's so many questions.
Well, what's clear is this has become almost a thorn in the side of the truther community, because it seems to be a stopping point for people who, as somebody who self-identifies as a conspiracy theorist, what I think I'm really saying is, I am fascinated with the nature of reality, and so that encompasses like all these things. But there are people who were right there alongside with me and then saw fit to just basically stop at this flat earth thing. And I said earlier that I have quite a bit of empathy for those people because, at a rudimentary level, it's clear we're being lied to about most things, right? Yeah. So the education system is propped up to lie to us about our own history and
egregious lies too.
Egregious lies, yeah.
Like vicious so ones.
Ways.
Yeah.
And so when people then start to speculate about the nature of the realm that we inhabit, meaning the physical body that we're standing on, and you look at the authorities on that information, and you kind of go, well, this has shady beginnings and a shady, existence consistently throughout it. By that I mean NASA. I don't fault people, but I just don't know why it's this big sticking point for people. Like, I do suspect, or not suspect, I would not be surprised if, we were eventually the recipients of some form of disclosure that said we were wrong, and it does seem to be that the Earth is the center of whatever this is. Everything else, moves around it in some way, shape, or form. Because I almost suspect that the reason that narrative was given to us was to, if it's not real, the idea that we, revolve around the sun and such, is to diminish our importance. And as somebody who believes in God, the importance is of that nature. It's like, why were we created? Who created us? And what does this all mean? And Sam Tripoli puts it really well. He's like, sometimes I think that NASA is to convince you of way out there, and dinosaurs are to convince you of way back then. So it gives like an XY axis to this dimension that you can now travel on, and it kind of makes it feel like the theories are much more concrete than they actually are. So, but once you get into the minutia of all that detail, and we're talking about, like I said, curvature and whether or not this plane dips its nose down, whether or not, we can go regurgitate these talking points, whether or not a sniper takes into consideration the curvature of the Earth when he, shoots a target that's very far away, or whether or not you're heading in one direction and time is one way, but then when you're heading against the spin of the Earth, should not your trip be shorter because the Earth is rotating? Like, I don't even begin to grasp these concepts in any way that's meaningful. I'm not going to be the guy that's going to give you those answers. And because of that, my speculation kind of stops there.
If this Earth is like this is actually a decent map to pull up for this. But if this Earth is, if there are portals in this Earth and dimensions, why wouldn't it be flat and round at the same time, but kind of like laid out like this? So when you get to these thin points here, it just, like, I don't know, meets you there. Like, we have a Bermuda Triangle where stuff disappears. We have the 33rd parallel where strange things happen. These are like weird vector points on the Earth. Mm-hmm. Why not?
And you know what else I noticed too? And I'd like to get your ideas on this, John, after this. But this was displayed pretty well in the Truman Show. And I think it is an aspect of our lives. And it is that when we are young, we're more or less told that everything that needs to be discovered has been discovered. There's no more adventure to be had. There's no new lands. There's nothing like that. We've already got a map and it's done. And in the Truman Show, the way they depicted that was obviously a lie to keep young Truman from, developing that sense of adventure and figuring out that he was in an enclosed system. And but in reality, that's very much that we take that out of children. And it's like everything that's meant to be learned has virtually been learned. If it hasn't, it's going to be done by people way smarter than you. In fact, trust the science. These are the people that are going to do it. And so I think it really takes that spirit of adventure and discovery out of children. And I think that spirit it's innate to us. And they squash that pretty early. So I don't know what to make of it, but I do.
Well, that's a cool scene in the Truman Show where Truman's a little kid and then he says he wants to be an explorer or something like that. And the teacher says, well, there's really not much left to explore. Like, she's shitting on his idea right from the beginning. The Truman Show is one of the films I've done a deep dive into, like a frame-by-frame analysis of. And I'm guessing you guys have probably heard the idea that this idea of the Truman Show is really the idea of a man's awakening, not dissimilar to what somebody might go through in an initiation into a secret school. You guys have heard this idea before?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Because it begins, so that the movie begins, and there's Truman in his bathroom doing a little like spaceship thing. And then he's getting dressed, he's ready for work, he goes to his car, and then a light falls from the sky, and that light is Sirius, as in the dog star, as in the blazing star. You guys are familiar with all of this.
Yes.
And so when I was watching back this film, it occurred to me that some of the things that happened with Truman, it didn't seem to be accidental. So the light falls from the sky, then when he's driving to work, his radio station starts getting buggy, and he overhears what should be back channel communication between the people producing his fake world. And they're talking about what, like, people who should walk onto what side of the road, or where Truman's driving. Now, these things, when you first watch the film, it seems like, oh, there's mistakes that are happening. And so Truman is accidentally finding out where he really is. It occurred to me when I rewatched the film, like I said, frame by frame, taking screenshots to do an analysis of it, that wasn't the case at all, that these things had actually been planted there. Someone had intentionally dropped the star in front of Truman.
This episode is brought to you by Matt Rife and his team over at RealRifeTechnology.com, the home of the Real Rife machine. A Real Rife machine is an electromagnetic radio frequency device engineered by Dr. Royal Raymond Rife in the 1920s, used to address various health concerns. Unlike imitation devices on the market today, Rife Technology was co-founded by Dr. Rife's relatives and longtime friend of the show, Matthew Rife. Real Rife machines are the cutting edge in wellness technology. I personally own one, and I use it all the time. I like to tune my Real Rife machine to the frequencies that help with addiction, to help curb my sugar cravings. Their Royal Rife machine is recognized as a general wellness product by the FDA. They're great for weight optimization and fitness improvement, mental clarity and cognitive functions, sleep enhancement and mood balance, vitality and sexual functions, digestive health and immune boost, skin radiance and endurance boost, healthy blood pressure maintenance, and more. And while you're on RealRifeTechnologies.com, be sure to check out the other products they offer and use promo code Nephilim for 15% off your entire order. That's promo code Nephilim, Nephilim, for 15% off your entire order when you visit RealRifeTechnology.com.
Someone had intentionally bugged the radio. Even his father turning up. Like, how did his father even get on the set? Why would they reuse the actor who played his father? Some of these things seemed intentional. And sometimes I wonder if a lot of the so-called waking up that we go through as individuals or as a collective, the truth community, whatever you want to call it, it's almost like it's been planted there for us, whether done by other humans or maybe done by something bigger, something metaphysical, what I'm trying to say. Like, were these things left there for us?
I agree with that. And that actually, I think, probably ruffles more feathers than you might expect, because people like to think that their awakening came about because of their like superior intellect, or, you know what I mean? It's like, you don't want to believe that you woke up to one lie and then were introduced to, what you perceive as the truth, because it feels like it was you that did it. And to say then that instead it was somebody else. But I agree with that. I look around very often and I'm like, why are they showing us these things? Why are they allowing us to see these things? I recognize that there's a price for entry to be able to notice them, meaning, the average person, whatever, 40% of the population who's too busy with the 9-to-5 grind, who, has whatever level IQ, isn't really a critical thinker and is just kind of a cog in the machine, that person's not going to see these things. So when you see them, you think it's because you have something that somebody else doesn't have. You have this sight that allows you to see these things. But maybe not the case.
Let me say, I think this is a good point here. We have been tugging on this string of, ancient history, hidden history, and biblical theory, biblical history, extra canonical text, to try to figure out what's been going on. And what you're describing right now is this, it's almost this little thread, this rabbit trail that's left for us to tug on, because it's left there. I mean, the Dead Sea Scrolls were just released, in the 70s, I believe? And it's supposed to be for
they were found in the 60s, yeah.
Yeah, it's supposed to be for the fig tree generation, or the last generation. Like, we're going to need these books to figure out the end times. Well, it's like, here they are. Yeah. And here we are pulling on them. We're talking about the ideas of the Nephilim and these ancient biblical stories, and they make the past make a lot of sense, and they make the future seem a little bit more manageable if you understand what these books are. But I think you have a different point of view, John. So what do you think about those things?
Yeah, the Dead Sea Scrolls, man. So these were discovered by some farmer or something in a cave. I'm just going to the official story here.
Actually, it was like a child that threw a rock that ended up going into a cave or something like that, and then he went in there to retrieve it and found these things. Yeah,
great story.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? Yeah, they were discovered over a period of 10 years between 1946 and 56 at the Qumran Caves in the West Bank on the Dead Sea. Isn't that amazing? So they've just been sitting there for thousands of years, and then shortly after what we're told is World War II, some dude just finds them. The initial The initial discovery by Bedouin shepherd Muhammad Ed Dib, his cousin Jamar Muhammad, and his friend Khalil Musa took place between 1946 and 1947. The shepherds discovered 7 scrolls housed in jars in a cave near what is now known to be as Qumran site. Interesting. So before I tell you where I come at with all of this, can I just ask you, and I mean this with the greatest of respect, I'm not trying to argue with anybody. Do you believe stories like the Dead Sea Scrolls? Like, do you believe these things are thousands of years old?
It's hard to say. Go ahead, Top.
Thousands. I know that some of the biblical texts reference specifically the book of Enoch. They reference the book of Jude references. They do reference some extra canonical texts that would be found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. I find it interesting that, like you said, 1947 they're found. In 1948, Israel's created. It's like it does seem very like here's this, and now here we are moving into biblical end times prophecy by creating.
The way, we did that episode yesterday, Top. I mean, so much shit happens at the tail end of the 40s.
Yeah,
and I mean, including like the MK Ultra programs and everything. I mean, it's insane.
Catcher in the Rye.
Yeah, it all starts like it's like they kicked the ball off during that
48. Yeah, that's when they started the precursor for MK Ultra, and then you get Catcher in the Rye in 51. 53 is MK Ultra. You have the Dead Sea Scrolls in 47. Israel created in 48. This is all after World War II. This is after we've absorbed all these Nazi scientists into our government to do whatever, being steeped in the occult. Yeah, man, I don't know where to put all of it. I don't know how much of it's true, but I think it is useful. I think that most of the stuff that they give us is true, but it's filled with truth with one very important lie.
And look, on that note too, I recognize that a lot of the the narrative for the Nephilim and a lot more of the finer definitions of them comes from the Book of Enoch, right, which is among that discovery. And I have to admit that this is something that I suspect is true, but then when I look over and I see like a Tucker Carlson talking about the Nephilim, I'm like, what do I believe? Because I don't know that these two things should be in alignment. But just to I don't know if this is where you're going, but I recognize much of the initiation that's happening to us, where we're being privy to this information. It's like a form of initiation. Is done through like these Freemasonic rituals, whether it's at the Super Bowl or in some piece of Hollywood work or whatever. It's interesting because even the Masons seem to, when you have the 2 pillars and then the archway over it, the cornerstone is Cancer. And then beneath the archway are the stars. It seems like they're pointing to this idea of the firmament. It even kind of points to this idea of like the Tropic of Cancer somehow being the entry point into this realm. And this is something that is kind of like incorporated into flat Earth maps. So I don't know. It does feel like all of the things that we champion ourselves for being like, oh, we're noticers. We got the. It's like they keep sliding them across the table to us. And they're steeped in like ritual and ceremony too. I don't know if they're trying to wake us all up or they're trying to control the narrative. But yeah, it's hard to know what to make of it.
Well, you mentioned believing in God, and I don't know where you guys stand necessarily with all of that. But even though I'm not what you might call religious or Christian, there are parts of the Bible that really do resonate with me. And one of them is Matthew 7:6, which I'll paraphrase as, "Do not cast ye pearls before swine. Don't give what is holy unto the dogs." And my interpretation of that is, if you have found information that is true, that is valid, that doesn't mean it's for everybody. Not everybody's going to appreciate it. And so I normally try to tailor what I say to whoever I'm speaking to, in real life or online. If I'm talking to a regular person, I talk about regular things. If I'm talking to a supposedly awake person, I find out what are they awake to, and then we go from there. Because I'm still learning about you guys and your audience, I don't know exactly what people are ready to hear, but I'm ready to take a chance. Are you guys up for this?
Yeah.
Are you ready to take a chance? Let's see what happens.
This is what the show's
Here
about,
at the
John.
Nephilim Death Squad with special guest John Labon. Are you guys ready to take a trip down some very strange rabbit holes? Are you ready for this?
Yes. Very excited. Let's go.
Okay, so you've got on your screen there the Oxyrhynchus papyri. Now, most people think they've got a decent idea about ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, and so forth. That is, thousands of years ago, there were civilizations. Okay, they probably didn't have electricity and computers and the technology that we have, They might not have had the medical advancements and this kind of stuff, but they were a civilization. They grew food. They had some kind of social order. They might have even had democracy. They were a civilization. And we know about this because we were taught at school. We were taught in television shows or on movies or documentaries. We've got a basic idea. A few thousand years ago, these people existed. And we've got records of what these people said and did. That's what most people think. That's what I used to think. Until I started trying to do some digging to find out what are the original sources. Because you guys, when you're in school or university, you weren't reading the original works by Plato or Aristotle or any of these dudes. You were reading a textbook that was published last year or 5 or 10 years ago. And that book will have references. So in other words, you can read the story as it is today. If you want to do further research, it's got the references and the footnotes. And if you want to, you can check them, but almost nobody does. I decided I would try this. So I found out what is the current story today of this character of history or this event of history or what have you. And it would take me hours and hours, days and days and days. But I would go through what is the story today, what is the reference, what is the footnote, and then I would track that source down. So you get the idea. You've got the story today. It's meant to be based on a story from before. But that story from before might be from 1950. It also is not the original. What are they basing their story on? So you go to their references, their footnotes. That goes back to a so-called translation of, say, 1850. So you go and get a copy of that. Okay, this is a translation. What are you translating from? And so I would follow this process. And invariably, I couldn't get back past more than a couple hundred years. And I could never find the so-called original source. And what they would say, if you follow this process, okay, what's your actual, how do we know what that guy said? How do we know what that guy did? A lot of it goes back to this Oxyrhynchus papyri that you've got on your screen right now. So this is the Oxyrhynchus papyri. If you want to scroll to the top there, yeah. A group of manuscripts discovered during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. So we're talking 100, 130 years ago from today. So if you went back 130 years, that's when these guys were finding this stuff. Grenfell and Hunt, they discovered an ancient rubbish dump in the sands of Egypt that just amazingly had all of these manuscripts scattered in these little sections that have since been pieced together by academics, we're told, at Oxford or elsewhere, that have these original stories. But as you can see, you can just think about this logically. If that's only 130 years ago, then how do we know that those fragments are not themselves based on the stories that were translated from translations that themselves can't be sourced? It's kind of like a circular thing. And it doesn't really make sense when I describe it to you verbally, but anyone can try this. Anybody can just pick a character of history. Suppose you're really into Caesar, for argument's sake. Find out what is the story today. Go to Wikipedia. They have all their references. Or get a textbook from a school. Or just do something. That'll be something that's been published today or in the last few years, most likely. But that's why they have references. And a lot of us assume that somebody's checking them. We all assume somebody's checking the references. That's what we all assume. I'm here to say that no, they're not. Because if they did, they'd find out what I found out, which is that those references will go back to some book from a few decades ago or 100 years ago. That book will go back to something 50 years prior to that. That'll go to a so-called translation with no original. There is no original translation that you can check. It's just a story where they begin claiming they're translating from something that you can't check. And the supposed originals come from a rubbish dump 130 years ago. And this is part of why I believe all of ancient history is a hoax. In terms of the written records, the stories that we've got that are written in books or on Wikipedia pages, I think it's all fake. Now, people come to me, quite understandably, and they'll say, oh, but JLB, I've been to Rome and I've seen the Colosseum and it looks really old. And yeah, I'm sure it looks old, but we don't know how old these things are. We don't know when they were built. And you can see these recreations. For example, Stonehenge in England. You can find photos of them repairing it, updating it, right? Oh, well, we just have to repair some. They can make stuff look old even when it isn't. Now, I live in Plovdiv, Bulgaria. According to the official story, Plovdiv is one of the oldest cities in the world. Okay, now, for those who don't know, Plovdiv, Bulgaria is just to the west of Turkey. This country borders Turkey, which is where you've got Göbekli Tepe and all this other stuff that people talk about. So we're just west of Turkey, and we're east of Italy, where you've got Rome and the Colosseum. So that's part of the reason why they claim that this part of the world is kind of like part of the cradle of civilization. And this city, Plovdiv, has an ancient theater of Philippopolis, thousands of years old, magnificent structure. In the summertime, they even put performances on there. You can pay your 20 or 30 lev or whatever it is and go and see ballet or go and see music. And in the summertime, man, this city is beautiful. It's marvelous. And sitting in that theater, that ancient theater, where thousands of years ago, other people sat in a different time, a different civilization, but on these very same stone steps, it's a beautiful experience. It's wonderful. It's marvelous. There's only a couple of issues here. One, this ancient theater was rediscovered 100 years ago. That's your first issue. Your second issue is that underneath it is a 4-lane highway. There's a 4-lane highway going underneath this ancient theater. Now, if you spoke to any of the people who went to this theater, they would tell you that they were sitting where humans sat thousands of years ago. They don't know any better. How would they know? How would I know? The point I'm trying to make is these ancient places that look old, we don't know they're old. And a lot of the time, they were also rediscovered in the last 100 years. And again, I'm sitting in, like right now as we record this interview, I'm sitting here in Plovdiv, one of the oldest cities in the world according to the official story. But it's the same as everywhere else I've looked into. Things were rediscovered 100 years ago. And so what I'm putting forward is this idea that the documents don't go back more than a couple of 100 years. And the ancient monuments, yeah, they look old. Sure, and everyone believes they're old. That doesn't mean they're old. And so I've come to the conclusion that this whole place that we live in might be no more than a couple 100 years old. It might be. I don't know for sure.
So you mentioned that you're not really Christian or religious. Have you heard of the idea of the little season?
Nope, but I'm here to learn.
Okay. The little season is something that I don't personally subscribe to, but what you're saying kind of adds veracity to it. So in the Bible, the book of Revelation, it talks about the 7 years. It talks about the tribulation. I'm sure you're aware. The Antichrist, he comes. After his short reign, there is a 1,000-year reign of Jesus Christ. And he comes and he rules humanity with an iron rod. But before that, after that, it says in the Bible that God will release Satan for a little season. And Satan will then take his army throughout the world, and he will declare war on Jesus Christ and God and this new Jerusalem. And then that will be the final judgment. He'll be sent to hell, and he'll live there. He'll be there for eternity or destroyed. Some people think that we are in the little season. The conventional thought is that we are waiting for the Antichrist to come and for the tribulation to happen with these 7 years, right? I'm sure you've heard of that. Little seasoners, very intense people, kind of annoying, kind of like the flat Earth community. They're vicious. They'll go after you. They think that there was a slew of hidden history, things that are maybe presented as older or time frames that were changed around. And you're talking about just the last 130 years. I part of me tends to agree with you, man, because it's like, we can't, what do you think the history books will say about just COVID in general? Depending on which political side wins, one side of history will not exist. The other side will be proliferated and insane. And that will be the truth.
Go ahead, Top.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, these people that believe the little season, which I deviate from Top a little bit in that I see a lot of, it's not something that it takes a lot for me to believe something, but I'm very well willing to entertain something. And I can see a lot of why people make this argument for the little season. And then we'll point to what we identify now as like Tartaria as being remnants of the millennial kingdom. So, I mean, there is like this precedent for really tremendous architecture that seemingly has no place in history, right? And that's kind of the Tartaria thing. And clearly there was some sort of a tremendous mud flood, or else you wouldn't find these subterranean levels that seem to be, they seem to have been meant to be at street level, but for some reason they're buried underneath all this dirt. And then, there's the orphan trains kind of a scenario. I think that happens around the same time, right? The 1940s is when the orphan trains thing took off, where all of a sudden we're just inundated with a bunch of, parentless children on trains. And between those things and a little bit of like lost time, some people make arguments for like we're missing like 700 years or we're missing like 1,000 years or something like that, where it just seems like we made a jump all of a sudden. There's a lot of really compelling evidence where if you look at it separately, it's confusing, but if you look at all this anecdotal evidence together, it starts to paint a very strange picture. So it seems that we have been lied to as far as the timeline. What do you think is going on here?
Well, I think about this stuff a lot, and I want to share with you my theory about that. But first, I can see you've got on the screen there. This is Konstantin von Tischendorf. Now, you think about it. We spent how long at school? In Australia, it used to be 13 years, 7 years primary school, 6 years high school. I understand that you guys have 3 levels of school, but they probably add to what, 12 years thereabouts?
Yeah.
We spend all this time at school, but most of us come away and we've never heard of Konstantin von Tischendorf, who was a German biblical scholar. In 1844, he discovered the world's oldest and most complete Bible, dated around the mid-4th century, and he called the Codex Sinaiticus after St. Catherine's Monastery at Mount Sinai. He also was the one who deciphered the Codex Ephraemi Rescriptus, a 5th century Greek manuscript of the New Testament. And if you look into it, what are the primary sources of the Bible? Because the Bible in your house or in your hotel or in your Sunday school, that Bible was printed last week, 10 years ago, 50 years ago. Maybe you've got one that's been passed down in your family for 100 years. But obviously that Bible doesn't come from the alleged time of Jesus or of his disciples or any of this stuff, like Matthew, James, the rest of them. So what are they based on? This book, where does it come from? Well, it turns out, according to the official story, that the Bible, as we know it today, stems from the Codex Sinaiticus, that's the one associated with Tischendorf, and the Codex Vaticanus, which supposedly was sitting underneath the Vatican for hundreds or 1,000 years before someone came along and rediscovered that. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is because it's not just with stories like Caesar or Herodotus or the Library of Alexandria or any of this. Even the Bible, if somebody were to try to find out, okay, these words that are printed on this paper in this book that I have, whether I think these are the words of Jesus or not, where does this come from? What is this a copy of? What was the original? If somebody was to seriously want to find out the answers to that and put in the time and the effort, they're going to come back to those codices that I just told you about, Sinaiticus and Vaticanus, and they're going to discover, once again, we're talking the last couple of 100 years. As crazy as that sounds. Now, here's where it gets really weird. I come along and I tell people this stuff, and I've been talking about this stuff publicly now for like 7 or 8 years. In fact, I went on the High Side Chats with Greg Carwood. I'm guessing you guys have heard of Greg Carwood, the High Side Chats?
We met him at a Sam Tripoli show not too long ago. Yeah, cool dude.
Oh, that's awesome. I want to hear more about that. I'm going to write that down. I want you guys to tell me about that. That's really cool. All right. So you met Tripoli and Greg Carwood.
Well,
that's cool. Man.
Actually, we do a bi-yearly event called Bohemian Grove.
No, semi-annually. The chat has roasted me for messing up that. It's semi-annually. It took me a long time to learn.
Oh, it's not biannual. Okay, well,
not biannual.
Sam Tripoli was the first headliner for the first Bohemian Grove, and we're hoping to get him again. Cool. Yeah, he's great. He's one of the best people we know.
Yeah.
All right, I've written that down, Bohemian Grove. Before we wrap up this show today, I want you to tell me about that. So you know who Greg Carwood is, the High Side Chats. So I went on his show like 2018. So we're talking the best part of 7 years ago now. And in the first hour, because you know he does like 1 hour public, 1 hour behind the paywall. The first hour with me and him became 90 minutes. And I went through all of this in detail, this what I call the history hoax. And I was basically saying to people, look, this is going to be heard by tens of thousands of people, many of whom believe in history and want to believe in it. Come and debunk me. Please, for the love of God, come and debunk me. If I'm wrong, if my method doesn't work, if any of these stories of ancient history, supposed, actually do go back to primary sources where you can trace the chain of custody of these documents more than a couple 100 years, if that's the case, find one, email me, come and tell me, make a video. I will be the first to put your research on my channel. I'll admit I was wrong. I'd love to be wrong about this, actually. Tens of thousands. I mean, I don't even know what Greg Carwood's audience is, but at the very least, it's in the tens of thousands, maybe an order of magnitude more than that. So lots of people have heard my theory and they've heard me explain
his
it.
His audience is big enough for him to have a car that's wrapped in Higher Side Chat logos.
Yeah, that's what he pulled up. It was a Higher Side Chats mobile.
There you go. So the dude is successful and he has a huge audience, many of whom, it's fair to infer, are intelligent, thoughtful, and willing to do a bit of research because they're curious. Would you like to guess how? Now, a lot of people came to my website. I got a lot of traffic. Some of them even came and joined johnlebon.com. Okay, so the episode was heard and some people really liked it. And in fact, I got like 100 comments on his behind the paywall section, which at that time, the average episode was getting 30 or 40. So it had quite an impact, made quite a splash. So people heard it. Now, would you like to guess how many people contacted me one way or another with a story of history that they had traced the sources for and found original documents more than a couple hundred years old? Would you like to guess how many?
Knowing people, I would say 0.
0, which leads to the inference that one of two things have happened here. Either that evidence might be out there, but none of these people have searched for it, and so that's why no one's come to debunk me, okay? Or that evidence doesn't exist and people did search for it. Either of those cases, we've got an issue here, fellas, because if that evidence doesn't exist, then the history hoax, as I'm putting it forward, is confirmed. Or if people aren't checking this stuff, if not a single one out of 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 people, whatever it is, if not a single one thought, you know what, this JLB guy, this somewhat smug Aussie-sounding dude thinks there is no sources, I'm going to debunk. If not a single one took the time to debunk me, then this supports the point I'm trying to make. People aren't checking this stuff. Mm-hmm. Nobody's checking. They can have a Bible in their house that they read to their kids. They've never checked, where does this really come from? Or they could have an Encyclopedia Britannica sitting on their shelf. They haven't checked. These sources that the encyclopedia claims to have, are these, like, no one's checking, fellas. No one. Literally nobody. No one. Not a single person until I came along. And then some people tried to copy this idea and they came back to me and said, yeah, I got the same results you did, JLB. The only people who've contacted me have been the ones who've said, man, I can't believe it, but I checked this story. Some of these people check stories I never heard of before. They're like, we were taught this story as kids. So I heard you on this show, or I heard you on that show. I tried to check it. And they send me in these emails, like the research they've done, it's phenomenal. They've all come to the same conclusion as me. So the relatively small number of people who've actually tried to trace the sources get the same result as me. Not a single person has got a different result yet. Now, to me, the conclusion from all of this is very obvious, but it's not a conclusion most people want to countenance, because in their heads, they've got all these stories of ancient Egyptians, ancient Romans, disciples, and Jesus. They've got all these stories in their head they don't want to let go of. Humans, we love stories. We don't let go of them very easily. And what I'm putting forward doesn't mesh with that. So they just forget about it. And tomorrow's another day. They'll listen to another podcast and forget they ever heard this. But that very small percentage of people who are genuinely curious and who actually want to base their opinions on evidence and are willing to go looking for it will come to the same conclusion as me. Ancient history is a complete load of nonsense. As crazy as that sounds, folks. Remember, I started all of this off back in 2013, minding my own business, and some dude says, how come this victim of a bombing, their trousers look like they've been cut with scissors? That's how this all started. I didn't know. I had no idea that I'd be sitting here one day in 2025 talking to some lovely dudes from America called the Nephilim Death Squad, telling them, folks, ancient history is a hoax. Nobody got hurt in some Roman Colosseum 2,000 years ago. I didn't expect this. I didn't predict it. I'll be quite frank, I didn't want it, but here we are, fellas. This is where we are right now.
Well, that's
how do you like those apples?
It's a big jump. It's a big jump to say nobody in the Colosseum but I understand that you're hitting a wall. So around 1850 or the mid 1800s, there's just nothing before that, is what you're saying. Nothing to verify. Like you pull this thread and that's where it stops.
Yeah, well, roughly even the 1700s, some of the so-called translations will go back to about I'm even willing to be really generous. Some of these Germans, for some reason, the Germans, I shouldn't say that. For some reason, a lot of the texts go back to translations that were done by Germans, supposedly on original source material that's no longer available. So you can take their so-called translation on face value, which is what historians have done ever since. You can take their stories on face value if you want. You're getting back to the 1600s in some cases. But a lot of these stories, it's the 1800s. But if you want to be really generous, yeah, the 1600s is as far back as you'll get.
So yeah. Let me just get this straight. All right, so 1844 is when the Codex Sinaiticus is discovered by this doctor. I don't even know his name, Constantine. But
it's an amazing story too. Do you want to know the story? The official story is he found monks. They found monks. He found monks in a monastery burning this original document for heat. Okay, so he just happened. Now this is the official story, folks. He just happened by amazing chance to turn up to the monastery, because he was searching, you see, he was searching the old world for these texts, these biblical texts. He just happened to find the monastery at just the right time, and he sees these monks burning some papyrus or some old paper, as we might call it, for warmth. And he wanders over and he says, "Boys, what are you cooking here?" And he's like, he picks up a piece of paper and he says, "Goodness gracious me, this is the freaking Bible. You got to stop burning this stuff, boys. In fact, I'll take it with me back to Germany." That's the official story. And no one knows that. How come they don't teach us that in school? How come no one knows that? How come all these people who come to me with all these Bible quotes and they're talking about Jesus and stuff, how come they don't know where the Bible supposedly comes from? Why would they know? Humans don't go searching for source material. For whatever reason, it is not in our makeup. Whether by nature or nurture, we don't check this stuff. It takes some really autismo guy, some strange dude from Brisbane, Australia, to say, you know what? I've got the weekend free. I'm going to sit here and read stuff and take notes. Who does that? Who the hell does this? That's bizarre. Most people are too busy leading their lives. They're too busy going to work.
Yeah.
They're too busy picking their kids up from school,
Maybe
taking them to
by
soccer
design,
practice.
right, John? I mean, it's like we have these machinations leveraged against us. They kind of ensure that we don't have extra time to do things like that. I mean, I'm definitely down with the idea that and this is just based off of like an intuitive feeling that we've been lied to on a massive scale, especially in regards to history. Do you find, I want to ask you this about like the Chicago Fair, what is it, the World's Fair, and this idea now of Tartaria. How do these ideas play with what you've discovered?
Well, the World's Fair stuff I find really interesting, and I haven't spent enough time doing a deep dive into it. But I did hear one of the High Side Chats episodes, maybe a year or two ago. One of his guests was from stolenhistory.org, I think the forum is called. And the reason I never really did a deep dive into their work originally was because when I tried to join their forum, they instantly banned me. And back then I'm serious. And back then, and I joined under the name John Labon. And so back then I was a little bit more, shall we say, maybe not conspiratorial, but I was like, oh, I see how it is. Someone who's doing the actual research into history is not welcome at stolen history because they've got their alternative narratives that they want to push. The person who comes along and cares about the primary source material, of course, they'll instantly ban him. So I you know that Michael Jordan documentary where he says, I took that personally. When they instantly banned me, I kind of took that personally. And so I forgot about them. I ignored them. And then years later, I heard one of their dudes on the High Side Chats, and he made a really good case, or I felt he presented himself really well. And I've been meaning to go back and try and re-register there or what have you. So the World's Fair stuff, I haven't spent enough time looking into too deeply. But to go back to your question, the 1800s, you hit a wall. You put it really well, you hit a wall. There was a film called The 13th Floor that came out in about 1998 or 99. So around the same time as The Matrix, The Truman Show, Dark City. A lot of these films came out just before 9/11, and they seem to have these esoteric ideas embedded within them. Have either of you seen The 13th Floor, I ponder?
I don't think so.
I've not seen it, but I'm familiar with the idea that for whatever reason, high or skyscrapers will skip, any high-rise building will skip the 13th floor, allegedly for superstitious reasons. Is that connected?
No, that's a different thing. Or maybe that's why the people who made that movie called it The 13th Floor, to do with the whole luck or chance thing. That could be the relationship there. But it's called The 13th Floor, and basically, I don't want to spoil the story because there's people who go around to people and say, "Oh, you've got to see this movie, you've got to see that TV show." I don't like these people, and I don't want to be one of those people. But I'm going to be one today. The 13th Floor, I highly recommend it, so I won't spoil it for anybody. But basically, there are these dudes back in the 90s who are trying to develop an artificial reality that is believable. Okay, so that's their mission. They've invested a lot of money. They want to create an artificial reality that is believable, and then they start playing around in it. Like, they get so good at it, instead of just developing the technology to sell it or whatever their plan was, they start playing around in it. And that's when some problems start to occur. And in the artificial reality, all of the people think they're real. They don't know that they're fake. Now, of course, these guys are developing the technology. They don't want the NPCs to know they're NPCs. That would ruin the whole thing. But what they've done is they've only got enough tech to build one city. They haven't built a whole world. Now, how do you stop the NPCs from finding out that they're in a fake world? Just keep them in the one city that actually does work. So what happens is, for an NPC to find out that they're in a constructed reality, the easiest way or the only way for them to do it is to try and take a long drive outside of the city. So the next city over is Tucson. So I'm guessing Tucson, Arizona, right? So if you were to take a drive, you would never leave the city. You've got your job, you've got your wife, your kids. Why would you ever leave? But if someone finds out the key, the secret, if somebody unveils to the NPCs what's really going on, and that NPC tries to test it, or not even NPC, these might be real entities. Who's to say who's real and who's fake in this reality? But the point is, the test is to take a drive, which no one ever does. But if they do, they eventually reach the wireframe mesh as far as the construct goes. And I use that as an analogy for this reality that we're in. People think that this place has been here for thousands of years. They think human civilization has been here for thousands of years. They're never going to test that. And I'm the guy to say, you can test it. Pick a story, pick any story, and try to find out what are the sources, what are the references. Then you'll find that book or that document, find out what are its references and sources. It's going to take you many hours, okay? Many, many hours. It's boring, especially because I started doing this 7, 8, 9 years ago, back when we didn't have all the apps and the gamification of the internet and all of the vaporable THC and all this stuff that has just rotted our brains. So even 8 or 9 years ago, it was hard to encourage people to set aside the time to do this. These days, I've got no chance. But if somebody wanted to test this reality, all they would have to do is pick a story or an event from history and try and trace the sources, and they will hit the wireframe mesh. In the movie The 13th Floor, that is a location. Anywhere too far away from the city, you hit the wireframe mesh. In our reality, in this place, it's history. Our history only goes back a couple hundred years. But to find this out, you've got to get in your car and drive to Tucson. You've got to sit in front of your computer, get some books, maybe go to the library, whatever. It's going to take some time, but take the notes, trace the sources. You won't get back more than a couple hundred years because that's when this place begins. I am the person here to tell you, you can test this, but I can't drive you to the wall. I can't drive you to the wireframe mesh. You have to want to go there. And do you know how much people want to go there? They don't. They would rather sit there and watch Netflix or bong on, vape their THC, eat their edibles, drink their beers, watch their sports ball, listen to the latest podcast about some bullshit ancient aliens. They'll do all of this. What they won't do, my friends, is get a pen, some paper, and put a few hours into taking the notes.
I would be super interested to hear you have a conversation with Paul Stobbs, which again, I already
did. I interviewed him for the Conversations last year, and it was because of him I had to look into this Book of Enoch, because obviously he's into the Nephilim. Right. This is Paul Stobbs of Understanding Conspiracy. Yeah, and right. I can send you a link if you want to put this in the show notes for my chat with him. Awesome dude to chat with. Very intelligent, well-spoken. He's got a great sense of humor. I can't say enough highly about the guy. Ultimately, though, a lot of his material goes back to this Book of Enoch, right? That's where this Nephilim idea comes from.
Well, you should talk to him more recently is what I mean. Because one of his new theories... He has a book about the Nephilim looking like clowns, and this is obviously he's using ancient history and mythology to discover this stuff. But yeah, his work on the Little Season has been something that we've been looking at for the last year or so. So I don't even think that came across your table, but he's the guy that sort of came up with this, or not. I don't even know if he came up with this idea. I wouldn't say that
he came up with it, but he articulates it really well, and he does a great job of presenting supporting evidence for the idea.
I think that your idea here of this ancient history, this hidden history that's not real, that it's hitting a wall, it would pair nicely with his, because he's trying to figure out how to present this in a compelling manner. And that's one of the things that stops me from buying that theory, is that I'm like, the ancient history doesn't make sense. Like, well, biblically it says that I don't know, like the topography of the earth will be different. So I'm like, we don't know. What about all these old buildings? And he's kind of like struggling to explain what it is. But I think pairing your theory here about ancient history and his theory about this the 1,000 years that are lost to time, and why why all of a sudden do we pick up at 1700s basically?
Yeah, and it's not even necessarily that so even the millennial reign of Christ is, I've heard people make an argument that like, when you say the millennial reign, it doesn't necessarily mean like a solid 1,000 years. It just means like a long chunk of time. I don't know where I fall on it, but like I said, I do see what people are pointing out. But my question for you, John, is like, let's take this for a ride, this thought experiment. Our history, for whatever reason, only goes back as far back potentially as the 1600s. We've only been here for a few hundred years. Why then do you suspect they would orchestrate such a dynamic lie to obscure that fact and then try to convince us that we've been here for a lot longer? And obviously, if this is true, then you have to throw out evolution, right? You have to throw out just ancient hominids and things of that nature, and the time frame for these early civilizations, the Sumerians and the Mayans and such. Did they even exist? And if they did, then they wouldn't have existed that long ago. Why the obfuscation, and why try to convince us the opposite?
Okay, that's a very good question. So first of all, and I know I keep referring to different, like you guys brought up the Truman Show, which I'm happy that you did because that's a useful film. I've brought up the 13th Floor. Sometimes it's useful to use books or movies that people are familiar with to help conceptualize things. And so there was a movie called The Village about 20 years ago, which maybe you guys have. Now? Yeah, well, I was still in high school, so it's about 20 years ago, I would say. In fact, I'm going to look it up right now.
M. Night,
yeah, that's right. Yep. Yeah. So 2004. Yeah, 21 years ago. Wow. And I remember because I still remember who I went and watched that movie with at the cinemas. Yeah, The Village.
Was it?
So anyway, I liked it. Yeah, I did.
I never checked.
And I went back and rewatched it last year, and I liked it again. But I kind of like Joaquin Phoenix for some reason. I like him as an actor.
Me too.
Yeah.
But I never went and watched that one last year about, was it Bonaparte? Well, who was that one about?
Yeah.
Napoleon. Yeah.
I didn't watch that either, but I loved him in Signs, which is another M. Night Shyamalan film. And there's a couple of really good ones.
Gladiator.
He was also in Her. I think that was 2007, the one with the AI girlfriend, which is so prescient. Like if you go back and rewatch it, this is a movie from ages ago. You go back and rewatch it now, it's like, holy crap, man. Because back then it was science fiction. This idea of a guy having an AI girlfriend, that was just bizarro sci-fi at the time. Yeah. Still an interesting story, but it's science fiction in the sense of it's a totally hypothetical landscape. That's kind of what makes sci-fi so fun. It's a setting that just isn't real, whereas today that is real, that is possible. Very much so. Yeah, it was, so yeah, he was in Her. He's been in lots of good stuff. Anyway,
I don't remember if you remember that, John, the sex talk or dirty talk, whatever you would call it. They did that like over the phone, her and him. So the screen just goes black and you're sitting in the audience and you're just listening to the moans of Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson very uncomfortably alongside the rest of the audience. Very weird.
Very weird, but very well made. And then the scene where she has a boyfriend, like she's been cheating on the main character. Who's she been cheating on him with?
Yeah.
That, what was that for? Alan Watt. Yeah, the philosopher. And so they've got like an AI version of Alan Watt. Very well made film, Her. I recommend people check it out. Like I said, especially given what we now know about AI, which by the way, if you said to me 5 years ago, AI, is it real? Is it fake? I would have said fake. I would have said like what we have today, I didn't think was coming in 5 years time, 5 years ago, or in 10 years time. It blows me away how powerful AI is. And I can't believe more people don't talk about it. Maybe they're not trying it out. They're not practicing it. Maybe people don't realize how much people are using AI. Like a lot of youngsters now, they're just using AI to give them book summaries of what's in the book. Yeah. I think we're already at the stage where the idea of people reading books is over. People buy books, don't get me wrong. But
dude,
people
I buy
are not
books.
actually...
I have so many books I don't read. I'm like, one day the grid's going to go down. And when the power goes out and we only have candlelight, then I'll make use of my personal library of all these books that I purchase and do not read. Yeah, I'm one of those terrible people.
I'm not saying you're terrible. I don't read enough books either myself. I try to use this excuse of, but I'm a traveler, I'm a digital nomad, so I can't afford to have books. Guys, I've lived in this apartment for 3 years. If I used to be a nomad, I'm not anymore. What's my excuse? I'm just not reading enough books. I think most of us aren't. But anyway, to get back to this, The Village. So The Village comes out 20 years ago. In the film, I don't want to spoil it for the viewers, but for the listeners, but most of them have seen it. In The Village, it turns out that the conspiracy, the plan, it's about the elders setting the lie up, creating this breakaway civilization, and the elders know they're going to die, and then their kids will fully believe that they live in this old, from a couple hundred years ago, civilization, rudimentary, no electricity the way that the rest of the world has it, certainly no internet. They're going to live a simple life away from the evils of the modern world. And so I think in our reality, and I asked you guys earlier, do you think the people who run the show are evil? I think it's entirely possible that the people at the top of our social structure today, they're not lying. They believe the stories too. Whoever set this place up are long gone, and almost everybody now, including Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, George Bush, Barack Obama, any of these people, maybe they're privy to some stuff that we are not privy to. Sure, why not? But in terms of how we really got here, they could fully believe the stories of ancient history the way that everybody else does. And as an example of that, there was this photo of one of Trump's daughters giving birth many years ago, like 2016 or thereabouts. She gives birth. She's in the hospital. Someone's taken a photo of her, like not like she knew it was a photo being taken of it. She's there. She's got the baby in her arms, and she looks absolutely exhausted, depleted, the way you would expect from a hospital birth, the way it's all done, the medical industry. Yeah. Now, why is Trump's daughter giving birth in a hospital? If they knew the truth about hospitals and how they really work, she would be nowhere near one. And yet she's giving birth in a hospital. Now, some of the people who I mix with would say, oh, that's a fake photo. The elites really have natural births. They don't get involved in all the nonsense that us plebs are given. That's just a photo to keep us plebs thinking that the Trumps and the other elites are part of the same medical system that we are, but it's really all fake. And obviously I can't prove them right or wrong. But to me, it makes perfect sense that even your Trumps, your Bushes, your Clintons, even your Elon Musks, any of these people, as powerful as they are and as great as their lives seem on the outside, they are still beholden to the myths of our times, including where we're from, how long we've been here. So to answer your question, why are they lying or why are they deceiving us? I'm not sure they're here. They might be long gone. And everybody believes the lie, except for some strange dude who some accuse of being a little bit autismo, who said, you know what, I got some time on my hands. Let's do some reading. Let's do some note taking, and came to the shocking conclusion. And it took me a long time, by the way. I didn't come up with this overnight. This took me a couple of years from the first time I got this idea in my head to the time that I published the first article about this on johnlebon.com. A couple of years of going down many different alleyways, many different stories of history. And I kept bumping into this wall that I would later realize is this wireframe mesh. But I just couldn't believe, like the initial conclusion, hold on, this is fake. I couldn't believe that until I'd done this with multiple different stories, characters, events, until it's kind of like if you walk too close to a mural, right? Someone's painted this big mural on the wall, and suppose we blindfold you and put you up against the mural and say, okay, take off the blindfold, what do you see? You might only see green or a white line with some green in it. Not till you step backwards do you see, oh, this is a mural of a giant caterpillar or of a kid's flying a kite or something. If you're too close to it, you don't actually see what it is. That's how the history hoax was for me at the beginning. I'm like, it's too obvious this is fake. And then I would put it away and focus on a different topic. I'd come back a few months later, try a different thing. And eventually my notes piled up, my research piled up. The conclusion became obvious. History is completely fake. And you guys might be talking to one of the few people who know this. Maybe this isn't a lie that the elites are perpetrating. Maybe they believe this crap as well. And there's only a small few of us who will ever undo the lie. And by a small few of us, I mean literally me, some of the people I mix with. Maybe you guys and some of your viewers might go and double check this and come to the same conclusion. But it might not be that we're uncovering a lie that the elites know. We might be uncovering something that even they don't know. Yeah, how trippy is that?
In your research, John, have you come across, it's this idea is like as far back as we can go as maybe 1600. I was watching just a segment of a video from a YouTube channel called My Lunch Break. And he starts to lay out this technology boom that happens. And I forget what the time frame is, mostly because I'm uneducated, but it was like in the early might have been that time frame of like the 1940s again. But this idea that like, no, it wasn't that. It was way earlier than that. Either way, there's a segment of time where for thousands of years, there's no real technological development. And then all of a sudden it's like electricity, the telephone, the television, like so many, the first automobile, everything seemingly happens in a few decades. I'm talking like 3 decades tops. And then he starts to expand beyond that, and it's like it becomes a snowball effect. And his insinuation was that the reason these technologies came out so pretty well realized and so rapidly in succession is because they were not a discovery or they weren't an invention. It was like a rediscovering or a re-releasing of things that had been previously suppressed. And there is a lot of speculation about ancient civilizations and what sort of technological advancements they might have had. We do that to death with the ancient Egyptians. Maybe they did a light bulb. Maybe they came up with the first battery. In fact, we have like the Baghdad battery, and we go, look at that. That's they were making batteries, baby. And then it's like, how did they build the megalithic structures? There's a lot of different schools of thought, but if you go down the technological aspect, people are like, they had resonance and frequency harmonics technologies. You can move a large object if you can get it to vibrate. It becomes actually quite light. And so I wonder, John, through your research, was there any ever notion, a notion that you came across where they had a thing, maybe these several hundred years ago, and then that thing went away? That thing being some form of technology, and then it reemerges and is introduced to us again to convince us of something?
That's a fascinating question, man. And the short answer is no. I haven't found any evidence of that, but I am open-minded to it. And the influence that these computers have had on our lives, and when you trace back, where does this all come from? It comes from what? A semiconductor. And what is a semiconductor? They just discovered that if they use some, sand, basically? They use some sand in a certain way, they can create these logic gates. Basically, if you have two legs that have positive, it'll let out a positive thing. And then you connect them together and you can start to make what we call digital devices. And this all goes back like less than 100 years, all of this technology as we know it now. And we've got to the point where people are spending, on average, according to the surveys, 5 hours a day on their smartphones alone. People are meeting their partners and even the parents of their children through these devices. They're swiping away. People are ordering their food on these apps. A lot of people are working in offices where they're behind screens all the time. It's phenomenal, the influence that this has had on the human experience. And so much of it goes back to a few dudes working out how to make a semiconductor using these diodes. I'm not even a tech guy. Like, I'm just using these ideas in the basic sense. People just working out how to build a physical logic gate and going from there. And then you look at AI the way it is today and the amount of power that this stuff has, truly phenomenal in my opinion. For example, I use this service, costs $20 a month, $20 per month. And for this, you can make, I think, like 20 or 30 minutes worth of AI videos. I got it to make a video on the wind turbine hoax. Okay. I was just testing this technology out. This is about a year ago. So I said, please make a video. I always use the word please when I'm using AI. I've got my own reasons for that.
Be nice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I said, please make a video on the wind turbine hoax. I've never made a video I've never done any research on the wind turbine hoax. I don't really know much about it. So I thought, just make a video on that. It comes back to me a couple minutes later with a video that include. So it wrote the script. It wrote the script by itself. It did the AI video, a very convincing AI video voice. It found the stock footage. So all this footage of these giant wind turbines, like, the wind farms that capture the energy supposedly. It put together its own theory. It then put the overlays of the text. It found its own music. And it took me a couple of listens back to notice this, even put in sound effects. So like 7 different elements it did all by itself. And its conclusion in this video, that wind turbines were a hoax and they're not generating power. They're actually using power from the main grid. And this is all just an attempt basically to steal taxpayer dollars. It did this in 2 minutes. And this is a $20 a month service. So I uploaded that to my channel. And to be fair, a couple of people did notice in the comments. They're like, hold on, because it wasn't my voice, you see. And I think that was the giveaway. Then about a month or two later, a very dear friend of mine and somebody who I collaborate with, let's put it that way, I started noticing that his videos, his conspiracy videos, they sounded just a little bit off. And I put 2 and 2 together. I'd received an email from this company, this AI company, saying, oh, we've got a new service. You can now upload your voice and we'll make your videos for you in your voice. So I hit this guy up. I said, bro, the last few videos on your channel, have you been using their service with your voice? And he admitted to me, yes. Now, I was the only one who's going to notice that, only because I knew that technology was available to the same service that he and I were both using. He could easily upload those videos. His own audience wouldn't know that he didn't make them. You guys could do it too if you wanted to. That's how far this technology has come already. So imagine how far we're getting 5 or 10 years. So to go back to your question, was there any technology that was found and then lost or what have you? I haven't seen any ancient old books or texts talking about this, but I don't know where this technology came from. And I can't help but wonder if this is like a revelation. And on that note, if you could go and get that image that I put, the news.sky.com, the Franz Ferdinand prophetic number plate, This is where we get into stuff that's really trippy. Because a lot of people are going to come to me and say, okay, JLB, you don't believe in outer space, but you don't believe in flat Earth. You don't believe in ancient history. You don't know how we got here, but you don't think the sources go back more than a few hundred years. You don't believe that one of the oldest cities in Europe is more than a couple hundred. Like, okay, tell us what's going on here. I don't know. I'm just like everybody else. I don't know. I'm trying to make sense of it. But I can show you this, and I can ask you for what you make of it. If you go to that Sky News article about the number plate of Franz Ferdinand's car. So World War II, a lot of historians will tell you, it was kind of fermented by what happened in World War I. A lot of our modern history goes back to World War I. Then you had a few years in between World War I and II. Then you had World War II. And then after that, you had the creation of Israel and all the things that have followed since then. So how did World War I begin? Some dude called Gavrilo Princip shoots some other dude called Franz Ferdinand. And then Serbia and Austria-Hungary get angry and blah, blah, blah. Next thing you've got a world war. It's a complete schmozzle. It all started because some guy shot some other guy in a car. That was how World War I started, according to the official story. Now, according to the official story, World War I ended on Armistice Day, which was 11/11/18. If you look at that image of the car, go and take a look at the number plate. And again, remember, we spent 12, 13 years at school, and most of us don't know this. Take a look at the number plate of that car. For the people who listen to this as an audio rather than watch as a video, let me tell you what the number plate is. It's AIII118. Okay, I'll repeat that. AIII118 is the number plate of the car that Franz Ferdinand was traveling in the day that he was shot. His shooting effectively leading to World War I that would subsequently, in one way or another, lead to modern history as we know it. World War II, the creation of Israel and everything that followed, goes back to some dude shooting some other dude in a car. The guy in that car was Franz Ferdinand. The number plate is AIII118. 4 years later, the same war would end on 11/11/18, which is to say that the car where World War I began, he was traveling in this car. That car's number plate had encoded within it the date of the end of the same war 4 years later. That's the official story, by the way. This is not some conspiracy car or some conspiracy museum. That's the official story. So how could it be that the event that led to the start of World War I and modern history as we know it, that the number plate of that car would have encoded within it the end of the same war 4 years later, 11/11/18? And how could it be that almost nobody knows about this? The normies don't know about it. School didn't tell them. The awake people don't know about it because no one's telling them either. No one's doing their own research. They say they are, but they're not really. No one knows about this stuff. And then this crazy dude, this John LeBon guy comes along and says, guys, look at the number plate. How is this possible? 11/11/18 is in the plate from the car that in 1914 supposedly led to the beginning of this world war. How is this possible? How is this possible?
So
I have there would be two lines of thought, right? Where it's like, and it's I don't know the answer, but I know people like you would say, well, this is written history, and this is like, it's like they're leaving clues. It's almost like we like this idea of consent. They have to give you clues as to what they're doing, and if you don't catch on, that's their consent. This is like the vampire rule. Other people would say there's numerology that's encoded into the fabric of this reality, and because shit like this happens all the time. Like when you show this to me, I didn't even flinch, because this is not the first time we've seen things like this, where there's like numerological signs as to start dates, end dates, weird things that happen in the world. It just seems all too often. The question is it there before, or is this a feature of wherever we're at? Like, does this happen organically?
Right. I get into this train of thought where when I receive things like that, it's just like it clearly feels important, but its nature is such that it's very hard to define or to discern one way or another. So I put it there for later consideration, and it kind of goes into this bag that I label like the theater of it all. And that is to say that oftentimes it feels like this is a mostly on rails experience, and it's like an experience that's similar to theater. You know, you're watching like Bernie Madoff make off with your money, right?
George Floyd's teacher is a Waynell Sexton, like
Waynell Sexton, right? There's a lot of humor in it too. Like some of these things, they're like funny, but there's all these strange idiosyncrasies that I haven't found a way to make a tremendous amount of sense. And then because there is like the revelation of the method, and I go kind of maybe that resonates with me a little bit, but not so much. It's almost like it's theater for those with eyes to see. And I'm not totally sold on that idea either. But when I look at, like, you know, Donald Trump is a great example. There's a lot of really strange shit surrounding him, you know, from the Ingersoll Lockwood books to his uncle, you know, cleaning up Tesla's inventions.
David, Ingersoll Lockwood books are another great, like, so this is written in 1890, maybe. Supposedly. But there's like not much history behind it. And then it pops up in 2015, 2016, and we're like, oh, look, here it is again. You know, it's one of those things.
It feels like theater. So what? I mean, what do you make of these things, John?
Well, you guys mentioned the strange names of these events. One of my favorites is Dr. Wayne Carver, who was the autopsy guy at that school shooting, whose name I won't repeat the school shooting because that's how my first YouTube channel got kiboshed. Was for talking about the school
don't worry.
shooting.
Listen, say it. This will go on. We're going to put, so what we do for YouTube is put up clips, safe clips with like 5 minutes or less, but it'll go on Rumble. It'll live everywhere else. One of our most popular episodes is Foundering. We just debunked the Sandy Hook. So feel free to speak, man.
There you go. You said it. You said the name. No, I refuse to use the name in real life or on the internet. I don't use this name anymore. It is verboten. But you know the event I'm talking about? And the guy who did the autopsies? Dr. Wayne Carver.
Right.
See, these guys have a sense of humor. But in terms of this number plate of this car, I don't know how or why this stuff happens, but it does happen a lot. This is just one example I can point to. If I had to come up with an interpretation, and it's just an interpretation, I might think that this is like an Easter egg where whoever or whatever created this place has left little Easter eggs so that some of us who are curious might realize this place isn't what we've been told. In our case, we've been told we evolved from some simpler species. We're on a giant spin ball going around the sun. This place civilization has been here for thousands of years. This earth as we know it has been here for millions or billions of years, blah, blah, blah. These are all the stories we're told. Little things like this could be Easter eggs, I think, to encourage some of us to try and think outside the box, to think a little bit more deeply, to reconsider what this place is. But that's just an interpretation of it, and it's very biased and subjective. We all project what we want onto different things. So I might be projecting onto this the Easter egg element, but I don't know how this stuff happens.
What do you think about this idea? Because I think that's definitely a plausible. It's a plausible idea. But we've been flirting with this idea of how this realm works intrinsically. So, all right. So let's just say again, whether you believe the Bible or not, there was a major blood sacrifice from the Son of God in order to liberate the world. This is how the story goes. And we know that people do blood sacrifice all over the world, and they continue to do it, whether it be ancient history, which we might not believe in, or current day. They're doing these things, and they're creating these altars. And so, how do I say this? I don't know. There's something about the blood, transmutation of the blood, something about like even things like adrenochrome, this suffering, the butthole of small children. These are significant things that people use to transmute reality, because I think that the reality we live in, if we want to think about it as a matrix, like ones and zeros, you can make things happen if you input the correct sacrifice.
If you know how to rewrite the code, right?
Right.
So,
yeah. It just feels like that. It feels like rewriting it. I mean, we're using a sloppy metaphor because we only know how to talk about computers and not this reality that we're in, which is, it does look like a computer, it looks like a simulation, but it's much more complicated than that. And some people have discovered the underworkings of this. So when you see these numbers on this car here, you'll say like, wow, this looks like it was completely set up. And I was like, yeah, it does. But what if that's done on purpose? What if that's like some kind of an alchemical sign or alchemical process put into this ether, whatever the hell's going on, for this war to start and end on this date? You know what I mean? Like, what if that's a necessary part of this?
Like, so when you look at, I'll admit, John, when I talk to you, I recognize a lot of, you do a great job of delivering information without making any claims, which is a good thing, right? You're like, look, I'm showing you these compelling things. I'm not sure what to make of it, but this is alarming. This is strange. And I think that's a great way to give people information, because so many people want to go then to the well, what are you saying? It's like, I don't have to be saying anything. I'm trying to show you something. Yeah. I'm just saying, I'm saying this is wild. So I tend to take the same approach to things. I will say that it seems likely that, based off the information that we have, and this could be a ruse, but there seems to be some element that either it is happening or they want you to believe it's happening. Elites, for lack of a better term, are engaging in ceremonial sacrifice, ritualistic, and these things, it's a trope in Hollywood, but the elements are always there. And what elements are those? Well, there's a geometry element, right? In the, let's say, an enclosed pentagram in a circle with salt on the ground, right? But geometry seems to play a role in this. And then there's also a frequency, a resonance, a harmonics aspect, and that could be the music, that could also be the chanting, right? Okay, so we have harmonics and resonance, we have geometry. There's also an energetic exchange, right? We know, given I forget what the experiments are, where you can speak positive or negative affirmations to water, and then when it freezes, it either takes on an organized crystalline form, or it takes on a chaotic crystalline form, right? If you're giving negative affirmations to it, it will be chaotic when it freezes, when you look under a microscope. And if you speak positive ones, it'll be organized, and there'll be beautiful symmetry and geometry in it when it freezes. And the same thing is displayed in plants, right? If you play certain music to plants, it either has negative or positive. So we know that this sound has an energetic aspect. Well, we also know what a conductor is. Metal is a great conductor. So is liquid. Liquid is a great conductor. So there's often the letting of blood, right? So now you have this moment where everything is negatively charged because it's a negative experience for whoever you're sacrificing. So that's the energy that's going out. That would be the same energy that made chaotic crystalline formations. It would be the same energy that created the plant when you subjected to it over time. And then you have the geometry aspect, which people who go on psychedelic trips will often claim that there is a sacred geometry aspect to our reality. Like behind the physical, there's geometry, and that's kind of a hard thing to pin down, but anecdotally it's there, right? So you have this geometry, you have this conductor in blood, it's conducting energy. What kind of energy? Well, it's a negative energy. There's also the harmonics and frequencies of the chanting. It seems that through geometry, through frequency, through energy, you can alter this realm in one way or another. And so when it comes to the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, it seems that God, if you're to take that story as the truth, is manipulating his own creation in the way that you do, right? Where it's like, if you're building a house and you want to change something about it, well, you've got to go down to the fundamental levels, the building blocks of it, and alter them. And so it almost seems like that's what happens here. And what I've said here is a lot, but I think the question that I really want to ask you, John, is where in this entire thing do you place, if at all, spirituality?
That's a good question, man. And I was having an interview with somebody where I was meant to be the guy asking questions, and the guest was meant to be the guest. And he started asking me some good questions. And he asked me at one point, am I spiritual? And I was like, you know what? That's a very good question. Am I spiritual? I don't know. That's what I said to him. I'm like, that's a good question, man. I don't know. Am I spiritual? Because I've got these theories about where we are, who we are, why we're here, what the point of this is. I've got these theories, these ideas, just like we all do. We've all got our own conception of what the purpose of all of this is. And I think about it a lot. But that doesn't make me spiritual. And I don't meditate, at least not in a formal sense or in a scheduled sense. Like, I don't sit there cross-legged trying to empty my mind. I did try it many years ago and I wasn't very good at it. And like many things I've tried over the years, I quit. Unfortunately, I've done this with a lot of things. I just, seems cool. You do it for a few days and then you think, I just can't do it today because I'm busy. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it next week. And then before you know, it's been 10 years. I guess I quit that. And then I don't pray. I don't go to organized religion and pray. I don't pray at night to God or anything like this. So I don't meditate. I don't pray. So in these easy to point at examples of spirituality, no, I don't think I qualify as spiritual in that sense. But not because I'm against it, not because I think there's anything wrong with it. If anything, I'm probably missing some spirituality from my life. I'm probably missing some proper, scheduled, or regimented attempt to interact with the immaterial world in a way that's beneficial. I'm probably missing that, to be honest with you. So I hope that answers your question. I don't think I am spiritual. I don't think so.
at all incorporated into your view, because I've gotten to the point, and I'm not saying that anybody can get here outside of maybe the path that I took. I can only speak to my own experiences, but I was, as we talked about before at the top of the show, a conspiracy theorist for a long time. And I wasn't raised religious at all. I had no spirituality. Well, I can't say no spirituality. For a brief moment when I was a child, before my grandmother, she was into like remote viewing and clairvoyance and things like that. Not something that she shared with me, only something that I would find out in hindsight when I became a teenager. She had been passed away for a decade. But I never was religious. I was never Christian. I didn't poo-poo it. I didn't dismiss it. And admittedly, in my research, a lot of things do end up pointing back to, as I'm sure you would have found in your research, many things do. There's a tether point to the Bible or some sort of biblical text that happens over and over again. And so it was always incorporated to some degree, but I kept it light. And then it wasn't until I had a profound experience where I felt as though I no longer had the luxury of pondering whether or not there was a spiritual realm filled with spiritual entities. I had been exposed to it one way or another in a pretty negative way, and then I had to do something about it. So that forever changed my, and I don't think people can get there without that experience. Maybe you can, maybe if you were raised in the church or whatever, but I think there are a lot of strange aspects of life. We just highlighted a lot of them. And a lot of them seem to be of a nature that is best described as supernatural, because we just lack any other way to define it. So I came to all of this not until a 30-something-year-old man, and that is to say that my interpretation of these things probably isn't conventional. I'm finding that out now because I find myself in a Christian space where that was never the case before. And I find that there's actually much minutia to fight over in this community. And so I think I'm finding that I don't analyze these texts in a conventional way at all, and that my interpretation of them is always flavored, right? We all have our biases, by conspiracy and the supernatural. And I do find that all those things together have acted as a sort of key where I'm much more able to, I think, understand these concepts, whereas before it was like, what's the conjoining tissue? What's the conjoining tissue? So like everything you're talking about here today, I can't help but feel that there would be immense spiritual interplay that you would find throughout this process, many idiosyncrasies that would be hard to define otherwise as anything but supernatural. Has that been the case?
Well, supernatural, I'm very open to, because when I went through school, when you get to senior high school in Australia, at least in Victoria, where I'm from originally, when you get to your final years of high school, you have to take English and you have to take at least one mathematics. But outside of that, you can choose what other subjects you want to take. I took physics, I took chemistry, I was really into the science stuff. And I really believed in this idea of, thanks to science, we can understand basically what we are and how we work. And there is just the material. And I didn't believe in any of the, what you might call supernatural stuff. There was always a logical, rational explanation, yeah? And it was only after I got into this conspiracy stuff 10 or 12 years ago, only after I had a bunch of experiences in my real life that I couldn't explain. There are no explanations, so far as I can tell, that just rely on cause and effect. This thing leads to that. These atoms or these molecules reacting in this way. Those explanations that used to make sense to me and still do to a large extent. You drop a pen, the pen falls. Physics and chemistry, I still like these things. I still think they explain a lot of things. But there are some experiences that I don't think the conventional explanations can explain. And so if you want to call that supernatural, you can call it that. And for just one example, when I did my deep dive into the Truman Show, I decided to spend some time going frame by frame through the Truman Show and coming up with my interpretation of what this film might be revealing, because I'd already heard about the Sirius thing, and so I wanted to look into, well, this Sirius star, the dog star, Freemasonry. I'm going to do this analysis. It might take me a few days, whatever. I'm going to put it together. And so I put together this analysis of the Truman Show, where I came to the conclusion that he was finding out things that he was meant to find out. It wasn't by accident. And then in my own so-called real life, literally that, and at this time I was 30 years old. in the Truman Show, even though Jim Carrey was about 35 or 36 when that film was filmed, thereabouts, in the film, he's on day 10,919 or something like that. And if you work it out, he's about 30 years old. So in the film, the character Truman is about 30 years old. I was about 30 years old when I did my analysis into the Truman Show, my esoteric analysis, I called it. Then literally within days of publishing that, I found out some things about my own so-called real life that weren't so dissimilar to what Truman discovered. And I can't go into too much more detail about it than that. But all I'm trying to explain to you is things happened in my life immediately after this esoteric analysis of a movie, a Hollywood movie from 20 years ago, from like 1999 or something like that. And I did this analysis back in 2018, 17, 18. So what I'm trying to say to you is people will say that's just a coincidence. And okay, without knowing all the details of what I'm talking about, fair enough, you can write it off as a coincidence. But I've had too many of these experiences now where I can no longer say it's just a coincidence. It seems like something else is happening. Either my actions today are somehow affecting what happened in the past, as crazy as that sounds, or I'm discovering things now because now is the time to discover them. And there's some supernatural force at play. And I know how crazy that sounds, but I read these books called the Sync books. So earlier on in this stream that we're doing now, I knew that you guys wanted to do the first 30 minutes and then cut to the patrons only. And I knew that because I watched a show with Human Vibration. So I had my prep ready. But for whatever reason, we didn't break your first part of this stream until it wasn't the 30th minute. Do you guys remember what minute we broke into this?
Probably
part of
close
the
to
stream?
48.
Yeah.
42 minutes.
42
minutes. For some reason, at the 42-minute mark, Top said, okay, we're 42 minutes in, we need to go. And I wrote that down because I'm like, 42. Interesting. 42 is the number of sync. There are these guys called the Sync books. They've got a website called thesyncbook.com. And if you've ever seen that YouTube video called 9/11 predicts Back to the Future predicts 9/11, which has millions of views and was very influential in the conspiracy culture when it was released. If you've ever seen that, it was made by a guy called Joe Alexander, who was a top 10 NBA draft pick, believe it or not. But somehow he got into this mystical stuff, this esoteric stuff, and he got involved with these Sync book guys. Well, to cut a very long story short, the Sync book dudes released 2 books. There it is. That's the website. 2 books, both of them called the Sync book. So 26 chapters in both. Each chapter belongs to a different author. And all of them are giving their own interpretation of these so-called coincidences, either in movies, TV shows, pop culture, or in their own life, or a mixture of the two. So at a very basic level, you might think of a friend, hey, I haven't called him for a while. And then before you know it, your phone rings and it's him calling. Well, what are the chances? I was just thinking of that guy. I haven't spoken in months. Just as I was thinking about him, he calls, right? That's a very simple example. Right through to the more extreme examples, like some dude writes an article about the Truman Show. This dude finds out his whole life is a lie. Then he finds out a few days later, actually, your whole life was a lie. Crazy story. And everything in between. They had 26 authors, 26 chapters. And then they released a second book, another 26 authors, another 26 chapters of guys talking about these synchronicities. And in their work, the number 42 is the significant number. And I was reading one of their books for the first time. This is back in 2017.
John, not to interrupt you real quick. Catcher in the Rye, which we covered yesterday, also 26 chapters.
Really?
Yeah, weird.
Dude, John, I don't know if you know how strange Catcher in the Rye is, but I mean that book is a through line all the way to from the JFK assassination to Luigi Mangione or whatever the hell his name is, who just that other CEO of that United Healthcare company. It's very strange. That's fascinating, actually.
What are the chances? And so anyway, 42, really significant. And I was living at that time. It only occurred to me when I was halfway through the first book. At that time, I was living at number 242 of the street that I lived on. So I'm reading this book, all these different authors. One of the common threads, all these guys talking about coincidences, esoteric ideas, mysticism, the supernatural. This number 42 keeps coming up. And then I realized I live at 242. And then I realized that the number 42 was significant to me for a reason to do with my date of birth. And I'm like, now what are the odds that I'm reading this book? 42 is important, the 242, etc. And then when I got home, I was looking at my website And on the banner of my website, which I made in 2016, so this is before I ever heard of these freaking sync books, I made this banner where I put together images from, like if you go and check out johnthebond.com right now, you can see the banner. I made that myself with this program called GIMP, G-I-M-P, generic, I don't know, interface manipulation, generic image manipulation program, I guess. It's a poor man's Photoshop because I am, after all, a poor man. So I made this with the freehand select tool. Every single one of those dudes on that banner. So you've got characters from The Land Before Time. You've got the dudes who supposedly went to the moon. You've got George Bush. You've got Barack Obama. You've got the girl from The Truman Show, where she's holding up the chef's pal. You've got Aldous Huxley, all these people. Front and center on that banner, which I made. I was inspired to make this when I launched johnthebond.com back in 2016. Front and center is a dude who is the boat captain. Okay, he's the boat captain from Waking Life by Richard Linklater. I don't know if you guys have seen that film, but it's a really awesome film. I recommend it. So anyway, that boat that he's traveling in has on it the numbers 42424 for some reason. Now, when I made that banner, I didn't know that. And I didn't know why 4224 was significant. So what I'm trying to say to you guys is, only when I was reading this book did it start to occur to me how much this number keeps coming up in pop culture, in TVs, in movies, which have nothing to do with me seemingly, but also in my so-called real life, to the point where I get invited by these guys, these Nephilim Death Squad guys, to come onto their show, and they normally break for the patrons at the 30-minute mark, but for some bizarre reason, and this wasn't scripted, there's no conspiracy here, I didn't tell you guys to do this, you break away at which minute?
42.
The 42nd minute. So I don't know if this qualifies as supernatural for you guys, but I'm telling you, there is something going on here. I don't know what it is. I don't know why it happens, but there is something going on, but it is only noticed by those with eyes to see, in my humble opinion.
Now would be a good time to tell you that we did this on purpose.
It's like, yeah,
exactly. Like, are they doing these things on purpose, or is this just serendipitous? And it's like, not just serendipitous, but is it supposed to happen this way? Is that your number? Is that the thing that's going to follow you forever? And it's like, maybe.
Well, it's not just my number, though. It's not just my number. I'm just one of the people who've noticed it.
Right.
But it's a number that's been happening since before I got here, and probably will keep happening afterwards. And one of the reasons why the sync book dudes talk about it is because, say, in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, what is the number? They give the supercomputer the number, and what is the number that he comes up with thousands of years later?
Oh, is it 42? Is like the
of course
meaning
it's 42
of life or
yes.
something like that? Man, that's a great movie. That's such a throwaway moment too, because you feel like as if it's not meaningful, right? Because that's kind of the joke is all this time to figure out what the meaning of life is, and it's 42. Huh.
Yeah, and then in the BBC version, because obviously you've probably seen the Hollywood version, but there was a BBC version, and in that version, which is the one that I've seen, they come and they get the answer, and he keeps saying, do you really want to know? And they're like, yes, tell us. Yeah. And he's like, you're not going to like it. They're like, tell us. And then he said, the answer is, and they're like, yes. And he's like, yes, 42. Yeah. And then they say, 42. And then the computer says something like, yes, this was very difficult to calculate.
Yep.
They've got an understated sense of humor, the British. So 42 is a number that's in pop culture since before I got here. There are other movies or TV shows that pick up on the 42. That's one of the reasons why the sync book people were in on it. But what I'm trying to tell you is in my real life, I read that book when I was living at 242. 42 was encoded within my birth date. And it turns out it was encoded even within the guy who's front and center of the banner that I made a couple of years before I'd ever read the sync books. And then I chat with you guys and we cut the 42nd minute mark. Now, if someone comes to me and says, that's all just coincidence, I say, fine. The same person will tell me that the number plate on Franz Ferdinand's car is just a coincidence. The same person will tell me that the Millennium Hilton, this hotel that's across from the World Trade Center, with the phone number 212-693-2001, they'll tell me that that's just a coincidence. If you write that phone number, that this is a phone number for the Millennium Hilton, looks like the black monolith from 2001: A Space Odyssey. If you write that phone number down, 212-693-2001, well, 226, the 26th of February, 93, that was the date of the World Trade Center bombings. It was also the date that they released Falling Down with Michael Douglas. The last four digits, 2001, were the year that the World Trade Center towers themselves came falling down. And this all happened in front of a Millennium Hilton, yes, and number 55 Church Street, that looks like a black monolith from 2001: A Space Odyssey. The same person will tell me that's all just a coincidence. So some people have eyes to see, some people do not.
what I suspect is happening here is like when, let's say the elites, right? We're going to use that terminology here. When they want to inundate us with some sort of messaging, well, they usually do it, you can find it. It's like it's on a Super Bowl stage, it's at a big concert, it's in a Hollywood film, it's in a music video, and you can find the various symbolism, and that was left there by, somebody with a plan. But then there are these other things where, in order to attribute them to human beings, well, these human beings have to be capable of like 5D, 6D, 7D chess, in order to go back in time and do all these different things. But I find that the more I've gone down this like path of Christianity or whatever it is that I'm on, I used to previously think that the creator of this realm, God, would be unrelatable, right? I was much more comfortable when I was younger thinking of him as an amorphous, energetic cloud somewhere out in the universe that all consciousness returns to. Because if the first law of thermodynamics is you cannot create or destroy matter, you can only change its form. That was a horrible paraphrasing of it, but I thought maybe the same thing could be said for consciousness. Where does it go? Can it be destroyed? Can it be duplicated? Does it return to a source, right? And that was kind of like this way of me looking at other people and being like, how do you think that you possibly have the intellect to define God? And then I started to realize that the nature of this realm is fractal, right? We could find like the golden ratio, the Fibonacci sequence under a microscope, but you could also observe it on a pine cone or something like that, right? It's like as above, so below. These things, they echo on the minutia all the way up to the macro. And so I thought in that way, then maybe God is sort of relatable if we were truly made in God's image. And it seems that no matter how small you look and no matter how big you look, you see the same thing. So maybe the same thing is said for like systems, right? We think of ourselves as highly evolved, and so we can create these judicial systems. But then when you start to read the Bible, you get this idea that there's very much a courtroom case playing out right now. And there are witnesses, and there are those who are bearing testimony, and there are those who will be judged. And I go, well, that's interesting because that's right there, and those are within is that another example of the fractal nature of reality? And so if we look over and we say, these elites are trying to manipulate the realm with geometry, energy, resonance frequency, and maybe that's the same way that God manipulates this realm. Well, it seems then that a lot of the things that we're doing are things that exist on a spiritual level in some way or another, according to the Bible. So then, if these elites are constantly trying to subliminal message us, initiate us in one way, shape, or form, there are those who think that we've all been subjected to enough rituals of the Masonic variety that we are all initiated to some degree. Well, maybe God does it too. And maybe these moments that you can't really attribute to human beings, because I don't think we're capable of playing chess on that high of a level across that large of a span of time. Maybe that's God doing the same thing. Maybe it's not their idea to inundate our subconscious mind with little whispers and clues. Maybe that is a spiritual truism about the realm that we inhabit. They do their own version of it, but even without them, maybe, and look, this is highly speculative. This is just like, what I'm really great at is just speculating baselessly with no information, right? But maybe it's God nudging you every once in a while. Hey, you see this? You see this? Because there's one thing happening in the foreground, but if you look in the background, there's something else, and it kind of beckons to you. And it wants you to look at it a little bit more scrutinizingly. And if you do that, typically, you will find more idiosyncrasies, more things that almost couldn't be possible in like a random universe where we just emerged from goo and then turned into, fish and yada, yada, grew legs. And so it doesn't work on that model, right? It's almost going back to the flat earth thing, but it does work on this other model where there's an element that we're not taking into consideration. And that element is a spiritual realm filled with entities that don't have a physical corporeal form, but do interact with this realm one way or another. And then you look at the mythos of all these different cultures, and they kind of thought the same shit.
The mythos are fake, bro. We can't trace it back before 1800s.
That's true too. But I just
you don't know that. Maybe you can. You've got to try. Maybe I'm just selling you a load of baloney, and someone has to call me out and trace the sources.
Maybe.
Who's going to step up to the plate?
There's some. I mean, there are like hieroglyphs, but again, how the hell am I supposed to?
Well, I can't carbon date shit because I'm a retard. Yeah. So
also, carbon dating is completely inaccurate. Like they don't. It's one of the worst forms of dating that we know of. So,
and if we take Ed Mabry's line of thought, where the speed of light is slowing down, then that would have an effect, a tremendous effect on carbon dating, because if the speed of light isn't a constant and it's degrading over time, then, you know, our measurements of carbon dating are all screwed up. That was at least Ed's take on it. And so I don't know. To me, what I just said resonates with me in a way where the type of person that I am, I'm like, research done job.
Well,
here.
Going back to what you said earlier a moment ago, if I'm understanding you right, it sounds like you're kind of talking about these energies and how much they influence us. And so people who are musicians, for example, if you speak to a musician and ask them, where'd you get the idea for that song or what have you? I've noticed this. They'll say they don't really know where. It's kind of like they're just channeling something. Whether it's musicians or authors, I'll say when they're in the zone, they feel like they're channeling something, right? And not in a nefarious way or in a I'm being possessed by the devil. Just they sit down and suddenly they've written 5 chapters of their book. It just all flowed. Or they've written a song, it's all flowed. I interviewed one musician one time and I said to him, because I'm really big on this idea of where does this inspiration come from? And I'm using the word inspiration. What I mean is you've got an idea in your head. Maybe you're a painter. Where's this coming from? Or you've just written this really good song that just doesn't just resonate with you and your memories of that girl or that event, but other people listen to it and it means something to them. Where'd that song come from?
Yeah.
Yeah, or this movie. I've never spoken to like a big time film director, but where do you get the ideas for any of these creative processes? Where does it come from? Inspiration is a term that we can use to describe that. Okay, great. A lot of people think these Hollywood film directors, they've put a 9/11 in their film, but the film is from 10 years before 9/11. They must be in on it. They call it predictive programming. That's what I used to believe. These days, I'm thinking to myself, hold on, what inspired me to put a 4242 car at the front and center of my banner? No one told me 42 was important. It just, I was the guy sitting there in front of a computer putting together a banner. And that took hours, by the way, to put that together. It just happened. Then I'm chatting with you guys. What inspired you or what caused you or whatever word you want to use to finish at minute number 42? Maybe we are vessels of something bigger. And in that sense, this place is like a giant stage or a giant theater production. And we want to believe, especially because we are so proud and egoistic, we want to believe that we're in full control of everything that we do and that we say, and that it's all us doing it. The idea that maybe to some degree, whether it's 0.1% or it's 100% or some amount in between, the idea that something else is using us, and even using is the wrong term because that's a loaded term, but somehow we are playing out a bigger image, a bigger show, a bigger performance that we can't quite understand, but we're part of it. For the 70 or 80 years that we're here, if we're lucky, the idea that we're not in full control scares a lot of people. And it probably used to scare me. Whereas now I'm like, you know what? If I'm doing something good, or if I'm doing something that resonates, or if whatever I'm doing is something that's worth doing, and I'm not my own inspiration, but something else is that I can't see or understand, okay, I'm comfortable with that. It doesn't scare me anymore. But I can see why people are scared of that idea.
There's like precedent. Again, this is like a biblical show, sort of. We reference it a lot, but there is precedent, and I have testimony myself of people telling me that I would do a certain thing, and I say this so much, but they said when I had a falling out with the church, and one of the women in the church was a sort of not a prophet, I don't know what you'd call her. She was a worship, like a prayer leader, and she was somebody that would do these sort of things. And let me tell you, I wanted nothing to do with the church at this time or these people, because they had wronged me in a very specific way. And she told me when I was ready to leave that she's like, you'll be talking to millions of people about God. And that really was it. And what I wanted to say was, F you. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go drive a truck, an 18-wheeler, and do general construction and make money. And that's what I did for the next 10 years. And then COVID happened and a bunch of other stuff happened, and here we are. And I look back on it, our downloads are well over 1 million. Is that a million specific people? I don't know. It's getting there. And it's almost like David said it in the beginning of the show, like we're on tracks, it feels like. Like this life is just on a certain track, and it's like, can I avoid going in this direction? It almost feels like no, but I can choose my path towards where I'm going to end up. And I can make it harder or I can make it easier. And maybe these numbers that pop up, maybe that's our path, because my number is the number 4. That comes up everywhere. I see it constantly. David's is 33, and we see that shit all the time. If I'm with David, we'll see that all the time, everywhere.
We're at 2 hours and 33 minutes.
Yeah, there you go. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe these numbers are just the way of things, and maybe we're intrinsically tied to them, and we see them and we replicate them, and that's
Well,
just
can I ask you
how it is.
this? Do you feel like this is all God's plan? Because one thing I do envy people who have real faith, like complete faith, in faith in whatever it is, like whatever God they think is in charge. One thing I envy is the peace and tranquility that must come from the idea that this is all part of God's plan. In other words, never worry, never fear, never have anxiety. It's all going to work out. It's all part of God's plan. People who have complete faith, which I do not, people who do, must have this inner sense of tranquility to never. Why would you worry? If you believe this is God's plan, you would never worry for a single second if you have complete faith. So I guess my question for you is, do you feel like you're at that stage? You have complete faith in the plan?
When
I do. My wife often, she's like, "What the fuck is wrong with you, dude? Like, you're like." I used to be a very like a worried person, anal, always. I mean, I still am with my work. I am like what we do with this show. After this episode, man, there's probably 15 things that I have to do to get this episode up and running, and I'm going to do that to the best of my abilities and in a timely fashion because I need it to work and I want it to work. But I am not worried about where I'll end up. I know that there is some sort of a plan, but I know I got to do what I have to do. So in a sense, I'm like, I am worried about the things that I need to do. I need to take care of my children. There's a dog here. I have a responsibility, sure, but I'm not stressing about it. And there's, in the last couple of years, there's been times in my life where I'm like, oh my God, everything can fall through right now. And all the stuff I've been working for can be gone in an instant. And I have lost. I mean, I worked for Odyssey.com, the streaming website. Lost that job. I was like, what am I going to do? And I said, you know what? I could sit here and ponder and worry, but I didn't. And somebody calls me from Gas Digital and they're like, hey, do you want to run our merch? And I'm like, yes. And then I do that. And then that sort of falls through. And I'm like, well, you know, I should worry. What am I going to do next? And then all of a sudden this show is a success. And like, this is like providing. So yeah, I worry about things, but I'm constantly proven wrong. It's like, well, why are you worrying? Why are you worrying? Because it seems that like everything I'm working towards, if I just continue to, like David says the prayer all the time, he's like, I don't know what I'm doing, but if I'm doing something wrong and God's watching me, slap me away from that. Point me in the right direction. Where am I supposed to go? And when you're going in the direction that you're supposed to go, things just seem to work out. And again, I don't know if it's my faith or if it's that this is an actual principle of this is what I'm supposed to do. So yeah, I don't really worry anymore about these things or where I'm going because I've been proven wrong enough worrying like an asshole. And it's also counterintuitive.
When I was younger, when I was really little, I had an overwhelming, like, it was almost, you could almost call it like a delusion, like in the way that children are prone to fantasy. But I had a tremendous, and I wasn't raised in a religious household, but a tremendous faith in this idea of like God and, you know, me being on his side. I don't know, like me, you know, God loved me, in other words. And when I got older, as a teenager, I became homeless, and that was like a big test, you know. And what I can happily say is I do believe that I got through those years never shaking my fist at God, never asking why this was happening. I don't think that was the right move. I think it's okay to wrestle with God and shit like that, but I didn't do that at all. Even though there was a lot of suffering and a lot of isolation and sadness, I still had this idea that God was going to provide one way or another. And that was an amorphous God, right? Because I wasn't Christian in any real meaningful sense of the word. And what I'll say is I have hit rock bottom so many times in my life because I'm a big like risk taker. I don't really play it safe. I will pick up my family and move to a new place if I think that there's something out there for me or whatever. And so what I have learned, and learned is an interesting word here because I don't have it down on paper, but I have been shown that no matter how many doors get shut on you, another one will open. And it happens in such a strange way that you can't attribute it to an individual. You can only say that, I guess you can get a little bit new agey and say like the universe provides, but I like to refine that a little bit more. And I do think that there is an individual creator at the head of all this. But I am now to the point where I wholeheartedly believe that I finally got on the right track. I think I wasn't on the right track. I think that was my fault. I think I should have been asking God for things. I should have been less lukewarm and more pointed. And I don't know. I think having a sense of conviction in some ways towards one way or the other is what God appreciates more than somebody who's just flowing through this experience.
It's a sense of not just conviction, but a sense of submission, which is really hard to do.
Yes.
But it's working out nicely for me. So I don't know. That's the best that I could tell you. I'm not here to preach to anybody, but it's when I've submitted to
I'm not saying that this is the way to go, but at 31 or something like that, whatever the hell it was, I finally pivoted and was like, okay, we're going to give this its due. We're going to give the idea of God, the Bible, and Jesus Christ an actual, authentic looking at, instead of just this peripheral glance whenever it came up. And as soon as I did that, I thought there was something really here. And then as soon as I started making content about it, everything opened up. And in a way that it's like I have been pushing against a solid brick wall for 30 years. And then God was like, you damn retard, look to the left. And I was like, oh, this one moves. Okay. And then I started pushing on that. And then all of a sudden, everything just opened up to me in the hugest way. And it only continues. And so also the same thing, I'm in love in very many ways with conspiracies. And that is to say, I'm in love with trying to understand the nature of this realm and reality. Why are we here? And all these different things. And all of that opened up in a huge way too, where I kind of expected to like start diving into the Bible and find a lot of things would fall away. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. And then I would basically get to a point where it's like, don't look at this the way that conventional Christians look at it. Look at it like this. And I go, oh my God, that fits really well. So all these things just bolster that. Now I'm to the point where like, yeah, I don't have anxiety about it. I don't have anxiety. I don't have depression. My top said it. My only prayer is like, I believe there's a path for us. Please just make sure I'm on that path. If I deviate from it, knock me back onto the path, the one that's in alignment with your will, because I do believe at the end of the day, we all have our thing. We're here for a reason. We have something we're meant to do. And it is the most satisfying, rewarding, meaningful thing to be on that path. And you don't have to hear it from me. You hear it from all kinds of people. It's like, once you figure out what you're supposed to do, man, it's like, yeah, actually, as that sounds, 100%. Once you are in a place, you get an overwhelming feeling that I'm locked into the correct track. This is what I'm meant to be doing. I have a sense of purpose. I'm driven, and that eliminates anxiety for sure.
Well, you both seem relaxed. You both seem at peace, and evidently your platform is going really well. So I say good on the both of you. It's fantastic to see. And I do, like I said, I envy people who have a faith that something is looking out for them and has their ultimate best interest at heart, and everything's going to be okay. I do envy those of faith, and I've gone through periods of having that kind of faith. I've also had periods where I'm kind of convinced. I'm kind of convinced the opposite. You know what I'm trying to say? So I don't have that peace and tranquility that you guys have, but the people who do, I'm sure many of your audience does. I think it's a wonderful thing. I'm not the stuff I was saying about the Bible earlier was not anti-Christianity or even anti-Bible. In fact, I gave it that Bible passage, Matthew 7:6, which, by the way, what does 7 times 6 equal?
42. I'm going to imagine 42, but I'm bad at math.
Matthew 7:6, cast not ye pearls before swine. There's some good stuff in the Bible, and just the idea of faith. I think probably someone's going to lead a much better life if they have faith, because life will test you. Things will happen. And those who can just maintain the faith, and it's called faith for a reason. It's faith. It's not necessarily logical. It's not necessarily based on immediate evidence, but broadly, if a man of faith leads a happier life, and what is a life more happy than one without worries? Right. If a life of faith can help you with that, I think it's a wonderful thing. And maybe one day I'll come back to faith, fellas, but I've just seen and discovered too many things that shook me to the depths of my miserable soul.
I agree. Listen, man, I feel you.
The truth.
We got a guy, well, let's wrap it here, but one of our favorite guests on this show, he's been on, man, close to 30 times. Be back on Friday, people, with the Genesis series. Nice. His show is called Faith by Reason. And I've learned a lot from them, and the reason why my faith was never strong when I was going to church or listening to just other Christian people is because they're like, just believe it, shut the fuck up, believe it. And I'm like, can't. You got to show me. And conspiracy theorists are very much that way. But when there is some reason applied to this, for me, I've seen enough, and it makes sense. But yeah, everyone has their own journey. And listen, man, there has to be people like you where they're like, you're telling me that you found the Codex Sinaiticus in 1844 and there's no trace before it, but this thing is over 4,000 years old. You got to show me. And yeah, I'd like to see it too. They have to show us. We have to figure it out. But yeah, I'm glad you're around.
We all got here because we're pursuing the truth. And I think even the Bible, in the Bible, it says that Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. And I don't think that's like some, profound euphemism. There seems to be some direct pipeline. It is truth, and then eventually God. And everybody's journey is a little bit different. But I think as long as you're doing that, and look, you're saying that faith is this, it's a component that it's necessary in some ways. And I think the way in which it's necessary is, let's just say, like, we'll use the analogy of a firmament. There's a firmament. And you drive, you get in a boat, you go to the edge, and you get to this place where you're touching this wall, and you can't go any further. And it's like, okay, you've just gotten a lot of information. But beyond that wall, there's still questions. But whatever this realm is designed in such a way that you, as a human being, cannot gain access to whatever information is beyond that wall. So I think that faith comes into play when I don't know, it's almost like you get to a place where, like, I've got enough answers to know that what I'm looking at is real, but I don't understand the nature of what I'm looking at. And that's kind of where the faith comes in, I think, because it's you're not dealing with a full deck. Yeah, and I don't think it's possible to do with a full deck. I think we pursue these things, we pursue gnosis, and we can get pretty damn far. I do believe that, but I think we can only get so far in this realm, in this form, in this state, and in this time. And then outside of that, everything requires faith.
Well, I have to say, I'm pleasantly surprised by both of you because I only heard of you through Human Vibrations appearance here. And I get this message from the Nephilim Death Squad. And I'm thinking to myself, what am I getting myself in for here? It turns out you don't have Death Squad vibes. Can I ask you before, I know we have to start wrapping this up, where'd the name Nephilim Death Squad come from? Like what?
I allow David to do all of our branding. So for Bohemian Grove, we had the VIP members had cloaks with little NDS logos on the side. Pretty much anything you see here, David brainstorms it. I was like, that's a cool name. And then I'm the graphic designer. I'm like, let me design this and make this aesthetic look this way. And it just it felt right. So we ran with it.
Yeah, not a lot of deep thinking there. I mean, a lot of the Nephilim shit, as we coin it, I think is just a way of saying, remember earlier when we talked about it, John, when you look at these things, it's like this tentacled octopus, it stretches into everything. The Nephilim feel like that. So if you take the Enoch idea, then some of these corporeal entities or non-corporeal entities that seem to work with us constantly are actually deceased, what were once physical beings. But I think that much of, if not all of the shit that plagues us has much to do with the falling away of these Elohim, these spiritual beings that were created. Don't say that, Rat Labon. These spiritual beings that were created by God, and then a third of them rebel against God. And I honestly believe that they are these various pantheons that we get. You can track like Zeus to Hadad to ancient Sumer, whatever the hell ancient Sumer even means after this episode. I don't know. But,
believe it or not, I've got a tab on my Firefox here about Sumer, and I was going to go off on a massive tangent on Sumer and the stories. Obviously, we don't have time, but before we do wrap it up, for your viewers who might be interested, or for your audience who might be interested, because most people, they listen to podcasts, they watch streams. This is a form of entertainment or edutainment, and they're not too worried about following the breadcrumbs. But for anybody who might be, this is a good way for me to wrap up what I'm trying to present here. On the screen is my little schematic for the Library of Alexandria. Now, most people have heard of the Library of Alexandria. The basic story is thousands of years ago, there was this great library, and it was basically the repository of human knowledge up to that point in time. People from around the world had written things onto papyrus, and it had made its way to the library. So the great learned men and the great scholars would come to this library. They would consume the information. They would contribute. This was the one place in the world that had all the info. And then, sadly, you wouldn't believe it, fellas, it burnt down. Burnt to the ground, all gone, all was lost. Great shame. Hundreds, maybe thousands of years of human progress was lost. That's the official story of the Library of Alexandria, as told by Carl Sagan and as told by Wikipedia to this day. So I said to you guys earlier, if you pick any story of history, any character, any event, I think you'll just find the wireframe mesh, as I call it. You just might be able to go back further than a couple of hundred years. So on the screen is my schematic for when I looked into the Library of Alexandria. Basically, on the right-hand side, you've got the normie. He's got his coffee. He's in front of his computer. And what's he reading or hearing? Probably Wikipedia or Carl Sagan. So I looked into those sources. What are Wikipedia's sources? What are Carl Sagan's sources? Both of them, their main source was a guy called Edward Gibbon, who wrote a book in the late 1700s that was supposedly a translation from Haverback. So I went and got a copy of Haverback. That was from the early 1700s. Haverback supposedly translated from Orosius. So this story of a great library that burnt down, I'm trying to find out, where's that story come from? You hear it from Carl Sagan, you hear it from Wikipedia. Where'd they get it? Edward Gibbon, where'd he get it? Haverback. So I went and read Haverback. Haverback was translating Orosius, supposedly from 400. Couple of problems. If you read Orosius's work, it doesn't mention a large library. That's your first problem. The second problem is, what is he translating from? Doesn't say, we don't know. So in other words, it takes time. I will confess it takes a lot of time that people say they don't have. But it doesn't take a great amount of creativity or genius. You don't have to be an academic or a scholar. You just have to be able to read and take notes and think, which I think most people are capable of that. And you don't have to go back too far through the sources to realize, hold on, this is bullcrap. Sagan cites Gibbon. Wikipedia cites Gibbon. Gibbon cites Haverback. Haverback cites Orosius. You read Orosius, there's no mention of a great library. None. Do you see the problem?
So
now, I don't expect that.
John, can I just interject? I mean, what it does is it says, hey, look, this is how long human beings have been around. And we're like, okay, cool. Where's all the writings and all the history? And it's like all of it was destroyed in this big fire in the library. And then we go, okay.
Well, that's what exactly. And that's why I wanted to look into the Library of Alexandria. This wasn't the first thing I looked at. I looked at the first historian, according to history, modern history, is a guy called Herodotus, he's called the grandfather of history. He was the first dude to write stories down on parchment or on paper. That's how history became a thing, thanks to Herodotus. So I started off with people like Herodotus. And then somewhere along the line, someone said to me, oh, what if the sources were lost because of the Library of Alexandria? And I was like, okay, great question. I'm going to look into that. And that's how I came up with this. So this is what I spoke about on the high side chats. And even though most of my work on johnlebon.com, most of the written work is only for the people who support it financially, this particular page, all of my research, all of my documentation for the Library of Alexandria, that's publicly available. So I'll send you a link to that page. And if you want to put that in your show notes, again, I know most people, when they listen to this stuff, they watch it, they're not interested in following the breadcrumbs. But for those few who are, this is a breadcrumb that's worth following, because either you're going to debunk me, and I'm only 37 years old. Don't let me spend the next 30 years saying things that are not true. I mean well, and this is the truth to me, but maybe I'm wrong. Come and debunk me, or more likely you'll find out that what I'm saying is true, and 99% of the truth tellers out there who are still going on about ancient history, they're selling you lies and nonsense, and I'm the one that's here to help you to stop believing them. This is the work that I'm doing, and I'm very proud of it. And I want to thank both of you for having me on the show. What we're going to have to do, if you'll do me the honor, is come on and be guests on Conversations, where I swear, my friends, I will ask you questions and shut up, because I've done a lot of the speaking today, but I was the guest. I should be allowed to talk a lot. But if you come and be guests on my show on Conversations, I would love to hear more of his story. And we didn't get time today, but I want to hear more about this Bohemian Grove, which sounds pretty cool. So we'll have to organize something.
Well, let me tell you, John, we rarely talk to anybody for 3 hours. It's not necessarily the guest's fault. It's mostly because we're not that interesting and can't carry a conversation for 3 hours. But we did it here. And so I got to ask you, John, will you come back one day?
If I'm invited, I'll be here. And I have to make a confession right at the end. I didn't even know this was happening today. I thought this was tomorrow. Thank heavens one of you sent me the email an hour before the show. It said, oh, here's the link to StreamYard. For whatever time it was, 9 or 10 o'clock your time. And I was like, No, today's Tuesday though. So then I went and checked because you guys had a scheduling form. I went and checked it. It said Wednesday because I was logged in through my VPN that had me in Australia, which for this time is tomorrow for them. So I had you guys booked down on my little schedule for tomorrow. So whichever one of you it was, Dave or Tops, who sent that email, you made the show happen today. If you hadn't done that, who knows what I would have been doing this afternoon. So you guys are professionals. Thank you very much, I have to say.
This is a great conversation. It's a genuine pleasure getting to talk to you. And we're both very grateful for you carving out some time, even if it is a little impromptu and you thought it was going to happen tomorrow, carving out some time to spend with us and unpack some of these ideas. And what's clear is just given this conversation and your body of work, there's a lot more to be explored. And so I look forward to any future conversations. We'd be honored to come on your show. I'd love that. So consider it done. We'll set it up.
Well, it is your show, so I'll give you the final thoughts. I'll just say my last bit. Thank you to both of you. Thank you to your audience, to the 1,000+ people on your Patreon who support you. This is independent content, and I know as well as anybody, independent stuff can only happen because some people support it. We're not CNN, we're not Fox News, we're not Washington Post. We don't have millions or tens or hundreds of millions of dollars backing us from God knows where. Who's behind these mainstream people? I don't even know. But independent stuff only happens because people support it. So a big thanks to all of your supporters. And I'm going to be one as well. I'm going to join your Patreon. I'm going to go and listen to your full interview with Owen Benjamin. I've been looking for someone new to listen to, and I think I found them here at the Nephilim Death Squad. I still don't know about that name, but I can get past that. You guys seem really cool, really fun, and thank you both for your time. And I hope you guys have a great day. And to all your audience, thanks again for giving me the time. And if you want to follow those breadcrumbs, check out the show notes because the rabbit hole goes deep, my friends. John Labon from Plovdiv, thank you guys very much. I'm going to shut up now and let you wrap up the show.
Thank you, John. Listen, you're better at this than us. I don't know what else to say. Guys, don't forget to obey, submit, comply. We'll see you next time. This was a banger. Peace out.
Okay.
The greatest hypnotist on planet Earth is a oblong box in the corner of the room. It is constantly telling us what to believe is real.
If you can persuade people that what they see with their eyes is what there is to see, you got them. Because they'll laugh in the face of an explanation that portrays the bigger picture of what's happening.